Meeting on February 27th, 2023. We always start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if everybody would stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight we're going to start with our public hearing. This is in regards to the proposed ordinance to temporarily prohibit the retail sale of cannabis in Simsbury for 18 months. And just how we got here was this had been in the realm of the zoning commission for about a year. And our board, people on our board brought it to the table here to discuss it as a policy issue. And on January 9th, we had a 4-2 vote to work on an ordinance to prohibit for 18 months, which required this public hearing. So you're here tonight to provide us with public audience and so that we can hear from everyone. Normally we listen, we don't respond. There's usually no back and forth. We're gonna do 3 minutes because of the number of people, or?
If you anticipate that there will be a large group, I would say 3 minutes.
Okay, if you can keep it to 3 minutes, a normal public audience, we do 5 minutes, but for a hearing, we try to keep it to 3 minutes. I will time you, I could give you a little bit of a warning. And we didn't have a sign-in sheet, so I'd like to just start with some order here. So maybe we start with the front row, go through the second row, and then the third row. Remember to state your name and your address, and let's kick that off. Anyone? Okay. Okay, I guess we'll start with Joan. Didn't work out well.
Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. The Board of Selectmen and other boards and commissions have had hearings with the same information. The special interest people with financial gain have come out in favor of cannabis sales in Simsbury. Others from the industry and attorney influences were in favor of the sales. The residents in Simsbury vehemently spoke out against the recreational sales in Simsbury. Many selectmen came to all the hearings with the same groups for and against giving testimony. Delaying a vote under the guise of not having any information is just another way of delaying the vote until after the municipal election, where the Board of Selectmen wouldn't be held accountable for their votes. Using Massachusetts as a litmus test for unintended consequences of delay is ridiculous since they are new to the game. Colorado has had time to research the consequences of recreational sales, and the research highlight the serious consequences to health and safety of the community. A recent article in the Hartford Courant, Board approves cannabis farm. Quote, despite long lines of speakers opposing new cannabis warehouse near the city's western border, New Britain's Zoning Appeals Board approved it Tuesday night. Where were they all tone deaf? All the members of the Board of Selectmen have already decided against residents' testimony against the sales in Simsbury, and that they are in favor of the cannabis sales, bending to political pressures. All these hearings were just a charade to open government, but in reality, the Board of Selectmen was solidified in their position for approving cannabis sales. Delaying the vote for 18 months will not change anything. Simsbury needs leaders to represent them, not just follow the path of other communities. The Board of Selectmen represents Simsbury, not other towns. The residents have spoken against the sale of cannabis in Simsbury. We need a vote now. The residents of Simsbury should remember, when these members run for re-election, remember their important vote to, quote, change the character of Simsbury, end quote, forever by voting for recreational sales of cannabis in Simsbury and vote them out of office. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Coe, and Facebook. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Hey, anyone in the second row want to come up for public audience? I guess we'll go. We'll start with you. You got up.
Mark Warren, 15 Oakwood Road in Simsbury. I have a prepared statement. It should be well under 3 minutes.
Great.
I can't think of one good reason why we would prohibit having retail cannabis stores in town, even temporarily. It's a legal product, it's highly regulated, and it'd be absolutely a revenue generator for the town. Among other benefits, it would help fund education programs or youth employment and training programs, as well as mental health or addiction services. It will increase employment in our town. It will give Simsbury an opportunity to promote social equity and assist those who benefit by their medicinal use by not having to drive all the way to South Windsor or Hartford as I used to when I was dealing with cancer. It will also reduce the number of empty storefronts in town, as well as help people avoid buying products on the street that might contain mold, fungus, or worse, fentanyl. The only reason I can think of why anybody would be against this is if they still believe the false narrative created by the decades-old and unsuccessful war on drugs, which has clearly failed. There is ample evidence cannabis is not a gateway drug like tobacco and alcohol. This is an unnecessary ordinance that is creating a waste of valuable time and resources and a missed opportunity for Simsbury. And let's not forget, and this is probably the strongest I feel about this, we allow a cannabis manufacturing facility that produces and distributes this product to retail stores throughout Connecticut. Aren't we being a little hypocritical by allowing this, but not allowing for the sale of cannabis products in our town? I think it is very hypocritical. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Josiah Schley. I live at 45 Banks Road in Simsbury. I've been a medical cannabis patient for a very long time, and I've been going to Hartford for a very long time. And a lot of the things that I've heard in the past hearings and whatnot were just the lack of education and the amount of very hurtful things implying that I'm the seedy underbelly of the town, like I'm the kind of person that you don't want coming to your town, coming to your dispensary. I've lived here all my life, and people are talking all about how it's going to bring this kind of crime and that to the town. All the dispensaries open in Connecticut, nothing happened. It's fine. Everybody's okay. And there's been a lot of promises made. I talked to you in my driveway. You probably don't remember it, but
I do.
Cannabis. And we do have, everyone knows probably by now that Curaleaf is heavily funded by Russia. It is well known. They're being investigated in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Vermont. And we allow them to grow in our town, but we're not going to let a small dispensary from Connecticut have a chance. We're going to let a Florida-based, and even behind that, Russian-based giant company grow in our town. They're the third largest energy user in the state, Curaleaf. Use all our energy, suck all our resources up from the town, give nothing back to us. Why can't we have a dispensary storefront and actually give back to the town and be able to use that for the town money? And it's just very confusing to me. It doesn't make sense to put it off because I think you all know, every single one of you, that it's gonna happen. So what is the point in extending it? And there's just so much hurtful language around who cannabis users are and so many assumptions about your lifestyle and what you've done. I lost 14 friends to opiates. And a lot of the people that are still alive found their way out through cannabis and things like that. So it's really tough for me to have, my friends up there in the ground on the cemetery hill and hearing people talk about cannabis like it's fentanyl, because fentanyl is the thing that killed my friends, not cannabis. And there's massive, massive differences. And we are not a seedy underbelly. We're everyday people. It's half the people in the room who won't admit it. It's just the truth. And I'm just saying, let's just be realistic and stop beating around the bush, and it's gonna happen. So that's what I have to say. Thank you for listening. It's very hard to word. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks for
Thank you.
speaking up.
Thank
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Barry Klein from 4 Bob White Way in Weetog. We've heard these heart-rending stories, and we all know people that have had issues where they've needed medical marijuana. These are two separate issues, first of all. If you have a disease or a condition, in Connecticut, it's legal to get a prescription and to get medical marijuana. Those are issues that do need to be separated. I hope in all of your minds you've had all the information you need to make that decision. My concern about the referendum before us is the 18-month sunset provision. In 18 months, if action isn't taken, it will expire. And my understanding is that the cannabis sales would become legal at that point. Right now, thank you for shaking your head, yes.
That's a true statement.
So what we have is, at this point, we have a status quo in this town of a certain character that we've established. People have moved into this town for that reason. People want to stay in that town for this reason. And what's being done is to change that status quo. There has to be some movement made. If you're going to change a status quo of a town and a character this dramatically, the heavy lifting should be on that side. I would say this ordinance should be made permanent. You can change it anytime that you would like. Take away the sunset provision. At some point in the future, if enough townspeople speak out and they want to do the referendum on their standpoint, they want to gather the signatures, petition, get out the vote, and it changes, it changes. If you feel like changing it at some point, whether it's in 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, you can do that. But right now, I would remove the sunset provision. I would keep the character of our town intact. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the second row? Okay, let's move to the third row. But you want to come up and speak? Anyone here to speak? Hi, come on up.
Hi, I'm Lori Nelson. I live at 12 Talcott Mountain Road. I moved here 2 years ago. And I moved here because Simsbury was voted as a great place to live. I moved here because of the character and the charm of Simsbury. And I love the town. And I'd like the town to stay the way that it is. I think I speak for my neighbors as well. I'm afraid that bringing in retail cannabis will detract from the charm and the character of the town. And there's too much that we don't know at this point in time about it. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I would be in favor of banning cannabis, and I would follow suit with other towns like Avon and Bethlehem that have banned it rather than put a moratorium on it. I would lead that way rather than in favor of cannabis. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here? A lot of people to not speak. Oh, Lori, did you want to speak? Okay, sure.
Hi, I'm Lori Boyko from 15 Oakhurst Road. Shangri-La is the name of the marijuana company that wants to set up shop in our town. Shangri-La refers to a remote, beautiful, imaginary place where life is perfect. It's an escape, an illusion. It is not real. Ironically, it's the perfect metaphor for the marijuana industry. Its allure is a mirage. We've been led to believe that the legalization of marijuana is safe, is the right social justice thing to do, will generate some nominal tax revenue, and hey, keeps you from getting arrested if you wanted to get wasted this weekend without a drive. What's not to love? But there's a drastic difference between decriminalization and commercialization. The marijuana industry is not made up of a bunch of stoners contemplating the start of the universe in their mother's basement. The marijuana industry is made up of corporate interests and private equity money. They have more money at their disposal than you and I could ever dream of. And they have it to use for one reason: to get us to consume and keep consuming THC. The more we consume, the more we make. The more lawyers they can hire, and the more politicians and voters they can influence. The more laws they change, the richer they get. Players in the industry openly describe the drug trade as a, quote, untapped commodity market that isn't being taken advantage of. This road to legalization was not a grassroots movement. The marijuana industry corporate interests fund a powerful lobby of highly paid marketing, advertising, and public relations firms and funnels money into nonprofit organizations who plant a constant barrage of carefully crafted ad campaigns and pseudo-news articles designed to convince us all that their snake oil is the answer to our issues. Economics 101 dictates that for the industry to survive when supply is created and outpaces demand, demand must be created. As the industry grows, two things will have to happen to drive sales. Current users must be converted to more frequent users, and new users must be created and captured. It's that simple. I'm already getting Groupon emails for marijuana discounts and advertisements for edibles when I watch YouTube, and I can assure you it's not because I'm a consumer. It's only February. Where are we headed? For 100 years now, we've lost millions of friends and loved ones to big tobacco, who is
6
fully
seconds, Lori.
all on board in this commercialization. How many of us wish we could go back in time? The 2017 Surgeon General's advisory showed frequent use of marijuana resulted in 130% greater likelihood of misusing opioids.
Time is up. Okay? Thank you.
Clearly, I'm not in favor of selling marijuana.
Thanks, Lori.
I want to say the last speak, but I do know.
Go ahead.
Sure.
You can. It's still open.
Elizabeth Peterson, 32 Foxden Road. I wasn't going to speak originally, but something really bothers me. I think I want to bring to everybody's attention, maybe other people have experienced too, being well within the boundaries of Simsbury while driving, and this is not a dense town, not a densely trafficked town. I have been behind cars where I'm driving along, I'm like, and I'm by myself, I'm like, where's the pot coming from? And then I start to realize it's coming from the car in front of me. It happened once in front of Tallmeadow Farms, another time by Abigail's, and the one that really slammed me when I was at the car wash on Route 44, which everybody knows is Simsbury. That is Simsbury, across from McDonald's. Car pulls up, one person in it, cloud of pot. I'm like vacuuming my car going, oh my God. Obviously high, smoking. We have a problem without even having our own legal dispensary in town with people driving high. So why we would bring that into our town when we obviously need to maybe start at more of a grassroots level. Like, I like to watch some of the reality shows where police pull people over, live PD, and a lot of them, maybe they're just saying it, they didn't know it wasn't legal to be smoking pot and driving or having it in the car or whatever. But maybe we need to start in the town or in the state with educating people first and then bringing in legal, recreational. And this is not speaking to medical. I understand people have medical issues and I support that fully. But legal, recreational marijuana, because we obviously have a problem in town. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Please, everyone, please.
Jocelyn Klein for Bob White Way, Weetog. So I just want to touch base a little bit about, one side has their statistics, another's, has their, you can do research. I haven't done a ton of research, but you can find anything to say, It's not a gateway, it is a gateway, blah, 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 blah. And we say that this research goes back, but how long does it go back that we're really truly talking about? And so I just think I agree with all the character things. I don't want it in town. But to those who make the argument, and I'm willing to listen, what's the rush? My thing is, what's the rush? We pump the brakes, and if they can make a convincing argument, fine. But I don't know about you, but I'm still confused by all the medical science that comes out and says, butter's okay, butter's not okay. Red wine's good for the heart. Red wine's not good for the heart. If we can't even get the basics of nutrition to the point that we all agree on what's right and what's not right, why are we in such a rush to say that marijuana doesn't have any of these side effects? So I just think it's a little bit early. I think there's a lot we can learn. I've recently been watching some of those History Channel things about food that made America. The food that made America that they came out with in the 60s made America fat, right? Like, look at me. But, we were in such a rush. Like, was Kellogg's that great invention of cereal? Now we're asking, was that really such a great invention? I don't know the true answer, and I don't know that I guess what I'm saying is I don't believe that we truly, truly know what we don't know yet. And I think it's early in the game. Maybe we won't know for years, but I would just like to pump our brakes, take some time, and digest all of this. And I totally agree with all the character. I love our little town. I don't want it to have retail sales. I certainly don't want members of our community to feel ostracized. We love and embrace you. That's not what this is about. I just say we wait. Let the science come in. Let the studies come in. If you can convince us, you can convince us. If they can put some weight loss stuff in it, maybe you'll convince me faster. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go around. Anyone else here want to come up and speak for public audience? Last call. We have no one. Okay.
We have a different issue, so I don't know if that's appropriate.
If it's for public audience, this is the public hearing on cannabis. If you're here for something else, you can speak at public audience.
Okay. Is that now?
That
Which
will
is
be after
next.
this, after we finish the public hearing. There's no
We'll make sure we don't lose you. Don't worry.
There's no one on Zoom. We did get some emails to the board that we read ourselves from some constituents. So we have a couple options here tonight, and one of them is to close the public hearing. We've heard multiple people at the zoning hearings. We had our own public hearing in November. And so is that the consensus of this group to close the public hearing? Just look down the line.
Move we close the public hearing?
Second?
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And then another thing we can talk about, if we want to sit on what we've heard tonight, if it's going to alter anyone's decision making, we can do that, or we can add to our agenda tonight to vote on the ordinance that's in front of us. So I know I'm not going to change my position. I'm not sure if other people down the line want to just kind of digest what was heard tonight and wait and vote on it at the next meeting. Just asking for thoughts on people.
I just want to clarify because it was put out into public audience. I think that it's pretty recognized that I pushed this to where we are today. But there were some points that were factually inaccurate that was stated in public audience tonight. This board is not unanimous in wanting to have a moratorium. We got to the point of having a moratorium because of work together to have a dialogue. If you remember where we started, there were three options. There was outright prevent it, there was moratorium, there was move it down to
leave it in zoning.
Leave it with the zoning. Okay, so that's where we got to today. The first option wasn't going to pass. I know myself, I would have voted against retail cannabis. I was very clear. I've been vocal about that. I know there's probably another one of my committee members up here that would have as well. But we weren't going to get there that night, and we're not going to get there tonight, most likely. But again, as I push forward, I believe this is a policy decision that belongs at the board's level. I don't think that the board is going to make the decision either way. So working in consensus with the rest of the board up here, we are looking for the public to potentially speak out with a vote if they want to bring it in the next 18 months. They have the option to do that.
Not eight.
Well,
Well, by November.
Excuse me. But I also want to clarify that this won't sunset automatically. If I'm on this board, this won't sunset automatically and move into, revert to what it's moving forward on its own outside of this board's a conversation reoccurring. I will bring it back up again, and however that board's constituted at the time, we will work together to have a conversation, and if we can change it. I just want to make sure that's factually known, because there were statements that were opened up tonight that were completely inaccurate, which is not uncommon, but just want to make that point. Thank you.
Okay. So, go
My
ahead,
thought
Eric.
tonight is if there was, I'd be supportive of amending the agenda and taking a vote tonight, but if we wanted to wait till our next meeting or staff had any concerns, I'd be okay with waiting.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead,
But,
Maureen.
if you would like to add it to the agenda this evening, I would recommend, perhaps just because we have, I think, a lot of folks who are here for this item, that, perhaps we do that early, maybe prior to my presentation, or perhaps even prior to public audience.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Kind of surprised it's not on the agenda.
Yeah,
But normally, Marie has
Typically,
a,
right, if it's a brand new ordinance,
Or a large-
we'll do it at the following meeting, just to give you some additional time to consider the comments you've received this evening. But again, you have been, discussing this for some time, so I think if you all feel prepared and ready to vote this evening, you certainly could do that. And we did also just prepare a motion for Wendy this evening in the event that you felt that you were ready to vote.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess if everyone's fairly secure in their positions, I think we might as well vote tonight, right?
So move to amend the agenda to consider the vote on the ordinance prohibiting the retail sales of cannabis in Simsbury.
Second it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I want to ask Maria, where do we put that?
I would say perhaps prior to my presentation, because that usually takes about an hour. So I just really hate to have folks
Okay.
who
So
are
after-
not budget nerds sit through in
We were
an
looking
hour.
forward to, we have
Especially
the
with
budget.
the inclement weather coming in. I
Yeah.
just think that might be a courteous thing to
Okay, so we could do it after public audience and
public
just do
audience
it.
and before the
Okay.
presentation, sure.
Okay, so on that note, the hearing's closed. We're going to move to public audience. And people who are here for public audience, we give you 5 minutes. And we'll let you step up. I saw we have some new people here. I'm going to let them go first tonight, Joan, since you've spoken before. So if you'd like to come up for public audience.
Good evening. My name's Barbara Weldon. I reside at 48 Brettonwood Drive, which is part of Summerfield at condominiums. I'm on the board of directors here, and we're here because we have exhausted our audience or with the zoning committee. And since the first days of the application to the zoning committee from Tractor Supply, the residents of our community have brought up to the zoning committee our concerns about the stockade fencing that goes around the perimeter between our properties and that of Tractor Supply. We have numerous emails back and forth between our residents, the board of directors, and town officials, convincing us that the fencing would be repaired or replaced, and that it was a condition that must be met before Tractor Supply got their certificate of occupancy. Well, that came and went. Tractor Supply was allowed to open without this being done. There was a site visit on May 26th. They were given 30 days to complete the repair or replacement of the stockade fence around the perimeter, and that 30 days came and went. We again submitted our concerns to the zoning committee. We got emails back saying that Tractor Supply had been placed in violation and was accruing daily fines. Still nothing was done about the fencing. After still more emails and patient waiting, we were informed that, quote unquote, we don't have a name. Someone on the board who is no longer with us signed off on the fencing issue, and there was nothing more to be done. We don't know who signed off, or even if they even inspected the fencing, because they would have seen that it was not completed. We, as taxpaying residents of the community, feel our concerns and promises of action have been overlooked in place of a new business in town. More importantly, we feel like we had gone through the right channels and exhausted the channels, and now are appealing to the Board of Selectmen. We have printed out the names. One in particular, Thomas Hazel, the assistant town planner, insisted Tractor Supply is bonded for all remaining work, and if it's not complete at the time of certificate of occupancy, stockade fencing is part of that. They are fully aware that they need to complete the task to receive their bond back. That has not happened. The violation was served, and again, somebody signed off on it without any of our knowledge or any of our inspection, and I guess it's a done deal, but the fencing is still incomplete. There's also a schematic in their proposal that there, in addition to the stockade fence, there's supposed to be a 4-foot high palisade fence along the retaining wall, and that was in the town minutes from 4/28 of 21 on page 14, and that still is not completed as well. So, thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Joan?
Thank you.
Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. Since the 1990s, in the Mary Glassman administration, the town's attorney was Bob DiCrescenzo. It appears that over the decades, the town attorney has had a cozy relationship with the various administrations, giving opinions that are not backed in law. Over the years, there have been several RFPs, requests for proposal, from the various Board of Selectmen, with Bob DiCrescenzo chosen. Past practice to have an RFP for legal services every 2 years. This has not been done. Over the years, there's been little oversight on the performance of town attorney DiCrescenzo to serve the interests of the town or give opinions that would serve the administration. Recently, the Silverman Group, owner of the Hartford Insurance Land at 200 Hop Meadow Street, had a proposal to develop a mixed-use plan for apartments and offices. T.J. Donahue, attorney for the Silverman Group, proposed a change in the site plan with the addition of apartments with the failure of the contractual agreement to build office space. The town, under the guidance of town attorney DiCrescenzo, was allowed to post a bond for a promise to build the commercial space at a later date, and then received an extension of the bond favoring the Silverman Group and violating the original approved site plan. It has come to my attention that town attorney DiCrescenzo was the Silverman Group's attorney when representing a land proposal in East Granby. A report in the Hartford Courant, December 26, 2022 states, quote, "In a meeting in late November, Robert DiCrescenzo, Silverman's attorney, told the Economic Development Commission that the 400,000 square foot cap just doesn't work," end quote. The Silverman Group had a proposal for a 600,000 square foot development. All of this is in East Granby. Town attorney DiCrescenzo, as a consensual employee of the town, is required to file a conflict of interest form with any conflicts. On January 12, 2023, months after representing the Silverman Group in East Granby, DiCrescenzo filed a form stating he was representing the Silverman Group while giving many advisory opinions to the town, representing the town's interests with Silverman Group. This gives an appearance of a conflict of interest that the Land Use Commissions and Board of Selectmen should review. The Silverman Group changed their representation from attorney T.J. Donahue to Simsbury's town attorney, DiCrescenzo, for matters in East Granby. Did the town approve attorney DiCrescenzo's representation with the Silverman Group? On June 5th, 2012, there was a vote by the residents with town attorney DiCrescenzo, Selectman Lisa Heavner, and Sean Askham present that the land leased to the town under the Eno Trust be changed from moderate income to low and very low income residents at the Eno Farms Affordable Housing. Since June 2012, nothing has been done to comply with the land lease approved by the town. The town has stated recently that DiCrescenzo is looking into it. Does it take decades for the town to comply with the land lease? At a December 12, 2022 Board of Selectmen meeting, town manager stated, when discussing the issue of condemned site with many blighted issues and fines in the thousands at 442 Hop Meadow Street, Capriola stated, we take, quote, we take property owners' property rights very seriously. Town manager Maria Caprioli and town attorney DiCrescenzo is concerned about property rights at 442 Hop Meadow Street, but has failed to address the property rights given to the town in the Eno Trust. Another ethics issue with DiCrescenzo was noted when Mary Glassman was first selectman, where DiCrescenzo, under contract with the town as town attorney, gave a donation to Glassman's campaign. When questioned about the apparent conflict, DiCrescenzo stated that Mary Glassman is a friend, knowing it was a conflict. Town attorney DiCrescenzo was asked by the town for an opinion on placing political signs on trees. DiCrescenzo stated in a professional opinion that trees do not have First Amendment rights and should be removed. DiCrescenzo seems to be working for his own enhancement or the wishes of the administration, sometimes in conflict with the residents' interests. Many issues before town attorney DiCrescenzo are not handled in a timely manner. It is time the Board of Selectmen asked for an RFP for town attorney services. The town budget should reflect
time is up,
expenditure for
Joan.
maintenance with
Thank you.
elevators that don't work periodically in town buildings, roof leaks that cause wet railings, and stairs in town hall and parking lot.
Joan, time is up. Thank you.
And insufficient lighting, creating hazards to the public. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Cole. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. We are now going to move on to our first selectman action, item A.
We have more. Oh, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
We may have more speakers.
No, thanks.
Sure.
Sure.
Hi, Lori Boyko, 15 Oakhurst Road. This is kind of a question, but I know you don't answer questions, so I'm just going to put it out there. 2 weeks ago, I called the zoning compliance officer with a question to find out if a particular sign in town was within compliance. I left my cell phone number, I left my reason for the call, I left the specific sign I was inquiring about, and I did not get a reply. A week later, I called again to ask the same question and left another message and got no response. I called several other times in between and only got a voicemail, so I didn't leave repeated messages. I only left the two. It's now been almost 2 weeks and I haven't heard back from the zoning compliance officer with a simple answer. So the question is, I don't know how long I should reasonably expect to hear back from somebody, but my statement is I haven't heard back. So I would think that I should get a response in a quicker period of time.
Thank you. We'll take that on. Okay. Public audience? Okay. Agenda item A, before we get to our budget presentation. So I have a motion here. I'm going to read the whole motion, and then I'll look for somebody to make the motion and to second it. Should the board add the adoption of the cannabis ordinance to our agenda for action this evening with a 2/3 vote, the following motions would be in order. Move effective February 27th, 2023, to add adoption of the proposed ordinance to temporarily prohibit the retail sale of cannabis in Simsbury to this evening's agenda, and to move effective February 27th, 2023, to adopt the proposed ordinance to temporarily prohibit the retail sale of cannabis in Simsbury as presented, which will be effective 21 days after publication in a newspaper having circulation within the town of Simsbury. Further move to authorize a summary of the adopted ordinance would be published. Someone gonna move
So
that?
moved.
I'm gonna
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? The only discussion I want to add here is that members of our board did hear a lot of people asking that what the options were for petitioning either for or against cannabis, and some of that was what influenced pushing off setting up the 18 months. So residents are able to do that if you want, because that was a voice and something that we had heard it all together. So I just wanted to put that back out there. All those in favor?
There's some
Oh,
other
yeah,
things.
sir.
I think people want to comment.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
No, I'm,
sorry.
I just wanted to make sure the petition
I was just going to say that each of us made more detailed comments the last time I think it was
did.
the last time we had a public hearing. I personally I don't feel like I need to repeat that, but I welcome anybody. I mean, we did have a significant discussion. Was there anything else? Oh, and I just really wanted to thank everyone who came out and spoke on this, both this time and at our previous public hearings.
Yeah, just my one comment. I just wanted to state for the record, we're not ducking responsibility. We are affirming for this term that this would be the prohibition, and then that, as Chris articulated, future boards can take that issue up, and I believe that was our intent of structuring the 18-month moratorium. I would hope that zoning would continue to look at this issue as in 18 months they very well could be law, and right now there are no regulations, I believe, in place, and that's unfortunate because I think zoning's had nearly 2 years at this point to craft those regulations. So I would hope that the zoning would continue to prepare in that time so that if and when there is a referendum or the 18-month expires without an extension, the town would be properly zoned in the event that this would occur.
I'd also like to make a brief comment. Right now, there is pending at least 6 bills in the state legislature regarding retail cannabis. This is a new industry for our state, and the regulatory framework right now is still being crafted as it's being rolled out. And I think that people have asked the question, what does 18 months get us? And I think 18 months can get us a much better understanding of what some of these regulations are going to be, so that we are much more comfortable understanding what a retail outlet here in Simsbury would look like, and what the regulations are going to be around that. So I think that is an important consideration to make. And the issues that are pending in these bills are significant. It's things like, what is the definition of an edible product? What packaging is going to be required around cannabis products? To how close in proximity stores can be to each other, to signing and billboard advertising. All of that needs to be still fleshed out, I think, by the state, and 18 months is going to allow us to understand what the landscape looks like before we make an irrevocable decision to permit it in our town before we know that. So that's one of the most important reasons why I'm in favor of this moratorium.
so I think, as we're all speaking on it, I was actually in favor of a full ban. I don't think this is a good thing for Simsbury. I do not think it's good for the character. I do not think it sets a good example for our children. I do not think it solves a fentanyl issue, because I think many people will still get it cheaper and illegally. On top of that, I think that one of the biggest issues we have is that police officers aren't properly trained to pull someone over and have a set limit and what that limit is. So I think that's a big obstacle that we have when it comes to people on the road driving high, and there's no real repercussion for that. But again, agreeing to the 18 months does allow residents to bring something forward, and it allowed us to, as a group, get to a place that made it a policy issue and took it from zoning at least for 18 months.
Okay. So all those in favor of the ordinance to prohibit sales? Aye? Say
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's 4. All those opposed, say nay?
Nay.
Okay, so it's a 4-2 vote. So the prohibition will be in effect after 21 days. From there, we'll start the 18 months. Correct? Okay. All right, now we can move on.
Coming out.
Pardon me?
So thanks everybody for coming out.
Thank you for coming, and hopefully it's not snowing yet.
You guys don't have
Thank
to
you.
stay for the trivial thing we're doing with called budget. But,
We've been
You're
looking
all
forward
here
to
for
this.
the budget.
it's only 110 million.
Please don't leave,
No big deal.
everyone.
Here, Wendy.
Yeah, thank you for
Ready?
bringing forward. I just thought everyone could.
I just got the text.
Good. Glad they did it early.
Can you give that to Chris to sign quickly?
Moving along, I felt like we could also.
I did.
Give me $20.
Is there not a cash option?
Yeah, Venmo me.
Not a cash option?
You can give me cash.
Turn it on.
Chris around the show.
Don't do it
This
up
is
here.
good.
It's not a good look.
What's that?
Don't do it
Is it up
now.
here?
It's not a
No?
good look.
Came out, but at the same time.
No, I know. But that's why I appreciate though when you
Maria,
bring it
let
to
the
me,
hubbub
but I
die
didn't
down.
know each person was.
Yeah,
going
it'll
to
take me
speak.
a minute to
I'm like,
load
oh,
everything
I
up,
would like
so.
to, but you need to.
So that's good.
I did. Did I? Did I not?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, Heather,
Yeah, and Chris kind
Lines
of
up with
spoke
Andrew,
to
so-
me.
I thought Heather and Eric did, unless you gave
I
it to,
did. I Venmo'd you.
unless you gave it to the wrong Wendy Maxudis, and I don't think
No.
there
I
was
had your
another
picture
one.
No, I'm,
Was I drinking?
No.
so what is
There's
it?
any downside to time.
$20.
We can't.
No,
undo it.
I'm-
Oh, Wendy dash Maxudis.
You can't undo it.
Can't undo, because
I don't
it's
think I'm the only one out there,
It is Amber made a lot of
and it has an old picture.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
I got it from Heather and Eric.
It would be nice to car wash and no one.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
That's a different story. Okay. 44, everyone thinks it's April.
Oh, man.
Once it's chocolate spot.
You get any, just go any good deals?
Yeah, they make you actually like put a
No,
reason.
is it close?
Trying to give some
I know. Why do you care?
I said to Charlie and Gracie.
There, I think I.
Thank you.
They got tons of these.
Okay. Got water, Maria?
You were kidding that this is an hour, right?
Sometimes if you ask a lot of questions, we
No question.
had it for an hour.
That's what Saturday is for.
It's hard to ask
Oh,
questions.
Thursday night.
Oh, yeah, it
That's the
starts on
Board of
Thursday.
Finance.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
I invoke my Steve Jobs theory on PowerPoints are the bane of our existence.
So,
What is this?
okay, let's turn this over to Maria and try to, you want us to hold questions and then we could
Or, if it feels,
sure
really
we're
relevant.
They're in our
and-
yard.
respectful and
To come
Wow.
here.
defer to each other before you
Hey,
just
must
throw
be
out.
making up.
I know.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
Okay, we're ready.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. I will be reviewing the town manager's fiscal 23-24 proposed operating and capital budgets. So the key budget objectives that we had at a staff level while we were preparing the budget was to maintain current services and programs. We also took into account the initiatives and priorities that you established during your goal setting. The larger focus areas, just as a refresh, are financial management and capital planning, the health, safety, and well-being of our community, economic development, and having an engaged, high-quality workforce. We've continued I feel proud to say now, our tradition of doing what we can to maintain and invest in our existing assets and infrastructure, particularly with utilizing cash to the extent possible for our ongoing and routine capital needs. We also take very seriously the policies that we have in place for our long-term financial stability. So you'll see this evening that we do propose to maintain our fund balance, to maintain our health insurance fund in a stable position, and to maintain our commitment to our OPEB and pension liabilities. And also, for the second consecutive year, we took a very close look at our various operating needs, our capital needs, community requests, our organizational needs, to really see what would be good candidates for uses of our ARPA dollars. And with really two key items in mind. We wanted to keep within the spirit of the intended uses for pandemic recovery, but also be in accordance with the Board of Selectmen policy that you established for those dollars. So this is just a high-level overview of our general fund, town and schools, debt service and capital included. And we'll touch on this as we move forward throughout the evening. But we have also proposed taking in the second round of ARPA funding in a manner very similar to what you decided last year in terms of taking in the revenue, appropriating it out as an operating transfer. So for this purpose, the second round of ARPA funding is reflected in the interfund transfers. These are just some of the other key funds that we have that are outside of the general fund, and we will touch on these more during budget workshop. And again, a summary of our revenues. The intergovernmental revenue is where the ARPA dollars are showing, so that is a bit higher than normal. Typically, that is largely our state revenues that we receive, but this time that includes those federal dollars, the ARPA dollars. So our grand list, most of you know we were in the middle of a revaluation this year. We are required to engage in revaluation at least once every 5 years by law. The grand list numbers that you are seeing do show the impact of revaluation, particularly market adjustments that were made, again, particularly on our residential and commercial properties for the real estate portion of our grand list. So overall, the grand list increased by just under 27%, which would be generating an additional $22.3 million in additional revenue. Our motor vehicle also increased by about 4%. Personal property decreased slightly by just under 1%. If you take out revaluation and those market adjustments, we're still looking at grand list growth of about 2.35%. That's about 2.3 million in additional revenue. And of that number, real estate was about 2.25%. I do also just want to note that these numbers are preliminary. The grand list was going to be finalized tomorrow. I believe Francine finalized it this evening. So these are technically preliminary numbers. I don't think that the final numbers will change these numbers drastically. And they are also subject to change based upon the outcome of our assessment appeals.
That's what they're doing upstairs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the final numbers are upstairs. Yeah. It's the Board of Finance's meeting. So before you get into this year's budget, what would the mill rate change be?
I do have slides coming up on that.
Good. Yeah. So, okay.
Favorable.
No, I mean, before we put the budget in. So if we put the reval change on last year's budget.
Amy and I can run that for you.
Yeah, because I mean, it's clouded with the new budget in it. What would be, if we didn't change the budget at all, what would the mill rate be?
Got it.
Because if we get an additional $22 million in revenue, that means, and it was a 30% increase, that means that the mill rate would go down, what, 30%? Give or take?
Yeah, and it is a substantial mill rate decrease that we'll be reviewing this evening.
All right, because that's our starting point.
So I think this is a really important story to tell when you take a look at our grand list growth, particularly over the last 4 years. For the purposes this evening, we're just giving you a 10-year snapshot of what our grand list growth has looked like. And, you know, on average, or the median value, when you're not looking at a reval year, it's been around 1%. But again, I think the really wonderful positive story to share, to tell, is that we've now had 4 consecutive years of grand list growth in excess of 2%, because again, take reval aside, we still had grand list growth of about 2.35% this year. And the 20 years prior, there was only 1 year where grand list growth had exceeded 2%. So just to really show how remarkable the investment in our community has been over the last 4 years, I think this chart just tells a really, really wonderful story for our community.
This is just so clear, this is real property, organic property coming online.
Yeah.
Correct?
It's
what you said.
like, right, exactly,
Yeah.
like additions, you know, residential improvements.
Just want people to
decks,
understand what that number,
furniture.
what
Right.
fuels that.
Right. It can be renovations, it can be, you know, new square footage, it can be both commercial as well as residential.
Maria, how did Francine's project with trying to get back the, what was it, less than 3 million? How does that play into that? Just a part of the 20?
Sure. So again, she was finalizing all the numbers. So I don't have a specific dollar value for you at this moment. But again, that was a very favorable process is what I understand. And we'll have more numbers for you as we head into budget workshop. But I'll make a note to get that final number.
And that is included in this new grand list numbers?
Yes, it'll be set.
Maria, I have a question. The 5.4, the 18-19, that was the last reval. That amount also includes the reval as opposed to taking it out?
Yep, the 6.4% was
6.4.
with new growth as well as market adjustments for the 18-19 fiscal year where that impact occurred. And the 27.76% does include the new growth as well.
Okay.
Right, and so we do show it both with, you know, the averages and the medians with and without reval years, because it can be confusing, and sometimes it's easier to see, okay, sort of in a more normal, more typical year, what does the growth look like?
Yeah, so for the takeaway on the revenue, we're gonna get the reval by itself number, the special project number by itself, and then we have the grand list by itself, right? The natural grand list growth outside of those two factors already. Okay.
So in terms of what we've budgeted and used for our assumptions on a revenue basis, we have used the tax collection rate of 98.5%. You may recall that is the preferred tax collection rate of the Board of Finance. We do know on a historic basis that our tax collection rate tends to be closer to 99.5 or 99.6%, and that we will typically use that difference to help with the fund balance contribution, and I'll speak to that later this evening. Just as a reference point, for this particular budget, 1 mil is approximately $3 million in revenue. For our local revenues, we have budgeted some decreases. Right, we have budgeted we have budgeted some decreases in a couple of our town clerk's office revenues. Conveyance tax revenues and land recording fees, we are starting to see those numbers come back to more of a normal. There were a lot of refinancing of mortgages going on when the interest rates were very low. As we've seen those interest rates increase, we've seen a slowdown in that, so we have budgeted accordingly. And as I mentioned previously, we do have the second round of ARPA funding that we have budgeted for.
I assume that's in the bank now.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
We have utilized the governor's proposed budget for our state revenues. We have generally found the last few years that the proposed budget that comes out of the governor's office in terms of municipal aid, it holds up pretty well as it works its way through the legislative process. Most of our state revenues will remain flat. There are proposed increases to the ECS revenue by a little over $200,000. You may also recall that last legislative session for the current fiscal year, the state implemented the motor vehicle mill rate cap statewide. And since at the time our mill rate was in excess of that, they were giving us a reimbursement. The reimbursement is actually for a year in arrears. And so we will be looking at an actual payment of about $1.5 million for the upcoming fiscal year. What you'll see later on this evening is that the motor vehicle mill rate is budgeted as the same mill rate for real estate and personal property based on where the mill rate came out after our adjustments. And this is just, again, a high-level overview of our expenditures. So our key expenditure trends, again, we have appropriated the ARPA funds as an operating transfer. We knew that debt service would increase this year. That's about a $2 million increase. You'll recall we did plan for that with additional cash that we had set aside last year to, again, help build up and work our way towards that increased debt service payment that we were expecting. We are anticipating general wage increases. We do have some settled collective bargaining agreements. We do have a few that will be coming due on June 30th. In terms of market data, what we're seeing at the municipal level through our statewide association is about 2.4% is where we're seeing a lot of the new settlements coming in. We've also appropriately budgeted step increases for our unionized employees who are due those during the upcoming year, and that is a significant budget driver for us. We'll typically budget for the unsettled contracts and contingency, so we don't give away our negotiating position. We also will be looking at a minimum wage increase for the upcoming fiscal year that will take effect in January. It was a little different this year. Over the last few years that we've had minimum wage increases, there was a very specific dollar amount that was placed into the statute. Very easy to budget for. The upcoming year, it's going to be a little different, and it's going to be a formula that the state is going to use. It's going to be looking at a number of factors, including inflation. So we did not have a specific dollar amount to work with. I really want to thank Melissa Appleby and Tom Tyberski in particular, because Parks and Rec is the department that is affected in the most significant way by this. They worked together. They did the best that they could to prepare a reasonable cost estimate in terms of what they thought that number might look like. So again, we think it's a good estimate, but it's not exact. And unfortunately, I think unless the state changes its legislation, we'll sort of be faced with this every year, because if the change takes effect into January, but they don't release what that number is early enough, we just won't have any way of knowing the exact dollar amount. And then for pension and OPEB, we have quite a small increase there. We did keep the interest rate assumption unchanged at 6.5%. for both the OPEB plans as well as our pension plans. And some very good news to report on our OPEB fund, but the general government plan for the town, as well as the Board of Ed OPEB plans, have reached fully funded status. Our police plan still has a little ways to go, but this is really quite.
Who can say that?
We're the first in the nation.
Yeah, who can say that?
Probably not, but it is really remarkable.
We're the
It's
first
very
in the state,
remarkable.
that's for sure.
And we should be proud of that. We should
Wow.
be really proud of that.
Amazing.
We get a proclamation for that?
Give ourselves a little.
That's what they're good at the state. Proclamations. There we go.
So other expenditure trends we're seeing, in terms of market increases related to inflation, utilities is probably one of the most significant budget drivers for us. In aggregate, across all of our departments, whether it's fuel, natural gas, electricity, water, et cetera, we're looking at a six-figure increase in the area of utilities. Another area that we've seen increases are related to our fleet acquisitions. And we do budget for 3 patrol vehicles in the operating budget, as well as one of our large public works trucks that's used in our snowplow operations on an annual basis. So those increases that you're seeing are largely from four vehicles. Another area that we're seeing across all departments, whether it's parks, highway, facilities, sewer, et cetera, are our building supplies, our cleaning supplies, our ag supplies, and our parts. So parts for equipment, parts for vehicles. We're seeing typically right now increases about 5 to 10%. And in a couple of our areas, things like paper products for restrooms, things of that nature, we're seeing increases around 25%. So that was another budgetary driver for us this year. And we do continue to see capital project cost increases for labor and materials, and we have made some adjustments in the upcoming year and projections related to that. And then lastly, in terms of operating trends, we did budget $25,000 in contingency for early voting. We know that that is likely to impact the upcoming fiscal year. We don't know yet the details of how many days and what exactly will be required. There are many proposals out there. So again, we did our best on information that was available and estimated staffing costs to prepare for this cost that will most likely be coming in the upcoming fiscal year.
Is that because we have to staff more people when the building's open, or what does that translate to?
Right, so different proposals, I think there have been like 10 days, 14 days, 30 days that we would have to essentially keep
A voting booth open?
a polling location open.
So a moderator, assistant moderator, checkers, the whole 9 yards would sit here.
I believe it's, I don't have the exact number of staff, but it is
Yeah.
almost like as if you were running an election on a daily basis, having to have a similar staff at a location on a daily basis for an extended period of time. So as you know, I receive service improvements and service restoration requests from our departments, and we do our best to take a look at our organizational needs and priorities. We take a look at various master planning documents we have, critical needs. We take a look at, some years we focus right on one service area more than another and trying to really kind of shift and balance those needs. If we move forward with service improvement requests, this is sort of my short list that I think would make the most sense for us to spend conversation on. And we will go into each of these items during our budget workshop presentations for discussion with you. If we were to include the service improvements and or restorations, the parks maintainer is in fact a restoration. It would have an estimated tax impact of about $16 a year for the median valued home. It would affect the mill rate by about 0.06 mils. And again, that would be if you were to do everything that's on this list.
Didn't we already do the book bike?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, it's not. It's sorry. We probably could have put a better title on the slide. So actually, this is a really neat 3-year summer program that we're proposing that I'm quite excited about. The finance subcommittee did hear a presentation from Lisa about this. It is a literacy and summer outreach program. Specifically targeted at our children in our neighborhoods. And the book bike would go and visit each of the 5 elementary schools 1 day a week during the summer months.
That's a way better name. Change that before the budget.
Yeah.
Because it's a second $5,000 bike.
Yeah.
You got me once on that.
I thought the
That would
same
be
thing.
essentially the cost.
You're not getting me twice on $5,000
Yeah,
bikes.
so that would essentially be the cost. And what we're proposing, again, it was really part of pandemic recovery and helping with literacy
Yeah,
efforts
that
and
makes
catch
sense.
up.
That's
And we
awesome.
thought, wow, what a low cost program that can have such an incredible impact for our community. And so again, our thought is to pilot it for 3 summers, see how it goes. This would be the cost of 1 summer.
Love it.
Yeah, I really love this. I'm pretty excited about it, and Lisa will talk more about it when she meets with you.
Great.
So this is just a quick refresher. These are the uses for ARPA dollars that you all approved through your policy, and I thought it was just a good reference point. I don't think we need to go over it again this evening, but again, it's there for reference.
Pretty good list.
It's a good list. You guys came up with a good list. And I've gone ahead for the purposes of discussion, and this, as you'll see later in my presentation, it is one of the items for policy discussion for you all, but really try to help prioritize and sort through the various requests that you've received with the remaining dollars that are available. You may recall seeing the Ena Memorial Hall HVAC project is very expensive, and we had proposed last year funding $1.2 million for town HVAC needs and $1.2 million for school HVAC needs. We did the school project this year. That was the high school project. And last year's budget was year 2 for Eno, so I'm still recommending that we use ARPA dollars, since that was one of the purposes of the funding, was to help with HVAC needs in town and school buildings. 2 other items that we had in out years, and we are still reflecting in out years the budget, but I do think these are very important projects for our open space parcels, is we do need to renovate House, Rest Pond, Bridge and Dam. That's the really lovely area right behind the library that gets very heavily used. And then Lake Basile Dam, for those of you who have done our Selectmen's bike ride the last few years, that is the footbridge that goes over that dam. That needs replacement as well. And again, our open space parcels and parks just were so heavily used during the pandemic. So I really felt that these particular capital projects tied in very nicely. They're an identified need. We know we have to do them, and potentially using the ARPA funds for those projects. You all probably recall you did set aside a portion of this money for the Latimer Lane outdoor learning spaces. And then 2 other capital items I am proposing in the budget. These were items that were presented to the Finance Subcommittee, but we are proposing a library book vending machine for Terrafil, which again, from a geographic equity perspective, I think this is a really neat potential opportunity that Lisa will speak to more on Thursday of next week. And then the town tourism map, I will speak to in a few moments. We do have a few pending outside agency requests for ARPA dollars. I believe most of these at this point have been presented to the Finance Subcommittee. We do know that the Housing Authority is going to have another request to help support some of their capital needs. We have business programs that are being worked on with Main Street Partnership. I think that we're getting close to finalizing that, but a placeholder for those programs. The fire district has requested support to replace several of their generators. And the Simsbury Ambulance Association is requesting loan forgiveness for the radio systems. You might recall that when we did the upgrade, we provided them a no-interest loan to help with the upfront acquisition cost. What's really interesting, and I have the number for you, is we've been doing some research recently on just some of the history with the town's involvement in making contributions to the Ambulance Association. And we did come across in the 1990s, we did actually assist with radio purchases for the Ambulance Association. So it was a while ago, but there was some precedent for that under the old radio system. I believe the payment we made on their behalf was in 1995 when we had the last radio system. And then lastly, recommending that if there are no other, critical needs rising to the top of the list, that we just create a placeholder for the health insurance reserve. My comfort level is typically having the health insurance reserve at about 25% to 33% of expected claims. So 25% is the equivalent of 12 weeks of expected claims. Our consultants will say, try not to have that reserve any lower than 25%. We're projecting year-end this year to be at about 21%. It's a little light. It's certainly not in the position we were in that we discovered, I think it was 1920, where we discovered that the fund had regrettably been insolvent. So we're in still a very much a stable position. But this just, again, I think would be a nice placeholder if needed. If we don't need it, we could certainly reappropriate those dollars for other uses.
The funding we did last year, particularly the social worker upstairs and
Yes.
for ours, those are fully funded from last year's appropriations?
Correct, for the
So that's why they're not here?
24 cycle. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Appreciate that reminder,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I wanted to take a moment to highlight for you the really thoughtful work that our leadership team did on, again, developing the operating and particularly our capital budgets around those goals and objectives that you had developed during the summer. So for financial management and capital planning, we are continuing down the path of shared services with the Board of Education. And as you know, with the recent addition of the shared budget director position, we've reflected those staffing changes and the proper accounting for the 7-1 budget. I'm also very excited about this proposed service improvement, and Tom Roy will speak more to this, but we are have been working with the Simsbury Public Schools, and we have a proposed service improvement for shared fleet management services. I think this is a really exciting opportunity, and I really want to commend in particular Tom Roy and Neil Sullivan for their work on that. We have a number of capital and CNR projects, again, that support this work. The financial fraud risk assessment, we have budgeted that project. Facilities master plan implementation, again, was one of your objectives. And we, again, really have included the most critical building infrastructure needs from that plan. I know you guys had that wonderful opportunity to do the tour. You saw the inner workings of our heating and cooling system, as well as some of the other just system infrastructure. It very, very much needs to be replaced and upgraded. Similarly, our elevators, I know we've been kind of working on this project, and the design work actually occurred this fiscal year and was recently completed, but our elevators do need a full replacement at Town Hall, the library, and Eno. The Parks and Open Space Master Plan, again, was another objective of yours. These are just a few examples, but again, the playground replacements, the athletic fields, irrigation, right, fulfilling that vision and the needs that were identified in those master planning documents. We've included expansion of the trail network. And this last item, I think this is a really neat opportunity. We've been following some of the legislation around some of the federal dollars that are coming, and it is very likely that there are going to be dollars for electric charging stations. It will most likely be an 80-20 grant, meaning that we're going to be responsible for 20% of the funding of the overall project. At a staff level, myself and Tom Roy, Tom Taberski, and Lisa Cream, we've worked collaboratively to identify about 4 to 5 priority areas as a starting point in terms of expanding electric charging stations at our municipal buildings and parks. So again, I think this is a really wonderful opportunity. It was specifically flagged in your objectives, and we just wanted to be proactive about planning for that. For health, safety, and well-being of our community, we have budgeted quite a lot of the police department requests. We also utilized their private duty funds. We'll talk about that a little bit later this evening. We've budgeted funds for crosswalk safety improvements, the Metacom Drive safety improvement project, and the Station Street 2A reconfiguration. Something I would just like to point out on this project and thank is our Belden trustees. So you might recall we did receive the STEEP grant recently. We had shared notice of that. That was also an 80-20 grant. And so the town's contribution was $40,000. And our Belden trustees were very supportive of using a portion of the Belden Trust for the upcoming fiscal year to cover the town's match for this project. They've been incredibly supportive of the accessibility work we're going to be getting underway at Eno, both in the parking lot and the entryways, the exitways, the elevators, and they felt that this was just another way that they could really help support our work in that area. So very, very appreciative to them for that. So for economic development, within our operating budget, we still have our funds for our Main Street Partnership Organization, our Chamber of Commerce, and our Business and Career Center at the library. And then 2, I think, really neat opportunities that we've budgeted in the CNR is a tourism map project. Again, this was a project that was presented to the finance subcommittee. And This is a request actually that we get quite often at Town Hall. There used to be a tourism map. It was sort of one of those fun kind of caricature, maps that you often see when you visit places, and it had, highlighted just different areas of interest in the town. We get requests for that quite regularly, as does the chamber. And so we thought, in working with them and working with the EDC, as part of, again, business recovery as we move out of the pandemic, could we start that map project up again? You might recall too, shortly before the tourism committee was disbanded, this was the one project that they flagged for you and were really passionate about, is that they really wanted to try to see this come to fruition again. There would be more of a cost in the initial year for design and startup, but we're proposing a 4-year project with the initial year and then 3 subsequent refreshes. Also, working with your objectives, I really want to commend George, our planning director, for being so thoughtful about a Terriffill area plan. And he has proposed a 3-year project that would start with visioning, and that's so important, but making sure that we follow through to implementation. And I think that's where some of our past planning efforts fell short a little bit, is making sure that we have the funds and the capacity to follow through with implementation. And so again, I think this was a really thoughtful proposal. And again, it would be a 3-year project with 3 years of funding.
Is this an actual charrette?
Yeah.
We
That
had
would
on
be
the
part of
policy?
it. That is correct.
So is it called a charrette or is it called an area plan?
We are calling it right now the Terriffill Area Plan because it's a comprehensive, it starts with visioning, it starts with what some people would refer to as a charrette, working all the way up to creating zoning regulations, revised zoning regulations as the implementation
Yeah,
phase.
I know an actual charrette involves a lot of resident participation, and we have as a policy goal to have it be an actual charrette, and I would like to see that reflected as that.
Yeah, I believe in the description in the budget document, it kind of goes over it and explains the project in more detail. And typically for a project of this nature, this is something that we would hire a firm to assist with.
Okay, I had the same question, just because when George, I had asked about this and he called it this, but he didn't use the word charrette, and I just didn't know if that's where we are headed.
The numbers, the terms for these things have changed 5 times. They were
Okay.
charrettes when we did them early on, and then they were neighborhood studies, and then they're all.
Fine.
We've done more damn studies on things in
So the
more than
cost
12
is
years.
the same for either, whatever.
Yep. This is
process.
at least
Okay,
the third
thank you.
one we've done
Thank
for
you.
Terriffill.
Really?
Yeah, we did the downtown one, we did the east, we did the neighborhood one, the Weetog one was in, then it was out, then it was in again, then it was out. We've had a few of these along the times we talked about. I don't know if we funded it
Yeah.
a while ago. I don't know if it ever happened.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with that.
I was pre-Jackie on the board, so.
Me then,
Looking
too.
at our zoning commission
We
member.
went on a charrette binge my first couple of years, yeah.
Got it.
Oh, before Jackie. Okay, thanks.
And then the other focus area was for having an engaged, high-quality workforce, which again, I'm incredibly appreciative of, given the shortage that we're seeing, particularly in technical areas in the municipal arena these days. So this is actually a question we get quite often from incoming candidates, is they want to make sure that our town is committed to professional development and that we have those dollars to back that up. So we do throughout the budget. We have continuing education for folks who have required certification. So for example, our licensed clinical social workers, our building official, et cetera. We have professional development dollars, funds for the annual leadership retreat, which again, this past year was wonderful. It was nice to be back in person with everybody, and we had a DEI-focused leadership retreat. We have, again, funds for just larger group work, individual training, tuition reimbursement, executive coaching, and then we've also included in the CNR an employee engagement survey project, which again is consistent with the objectives that you had established. So just a quick refresh as we're shifting into the capital budget, our capital and debt service budget principles. Again, that we were really trying to the extent possible to use cash for our smaller value and routine capital needs. We really strongly believe in continuing to build our capital reserve with funds from project closeouts and year-end savings when available. And again, I think it's important just to remind ourselves of what can these dollars be used for? Emergencies, capital projects that we would otherwise fund by bonding just simply due to cash capacity, offsets to debt service, unanticipated cost increases. I think what we were able to do with the Latimer Lane inflation increase was really remarkable. And again, something we should be really proud of, that we planned, we saved money appropriately, we had this, unanticipated cost increase, and we were able to cover that cost increase without having an additional tax impact on our taxpayers. Also, for capital reserve, when we have unanticipated grant opportunities that require a local match. So again, I think these are not all inclusive of every possible scenario that might be an appropriate use for the capital reserve. But when I kind of look back on our experience since we established this a few years ago, this has been, I think, such a wonderful asset to our community to have this tool in our toolbox.
Are we going to put in any grants to be designated in here so we can avoid what happened last year?
We have a few for things
year?
that are on our radar. Yes. For things that are on our radar,
Yeah.
we have included. And then it's very important to us, obviously, right? There's only a certain amount of resources available in any given period of time. So every year we are quantifying our baseline capital needs. We're reevaluating, we're reprioritizing based on where we are at any given point in time. This is just a high-level overview of our revenues for the capital budget, as well as expenditures. So this project I just wanted to bring to your attention. You might recall that the golf course irrigation system was a previously approved capital project. Like many of our projects that were approved in that spring of 21 timeframe, construction inflation has impacted the project. That project is currently underway. We're doing the dam portion of that work. We are expecting to need additional funds. So what we are proposing, which I think is very consistent with the work that we did on the Parks and Rec Fund analysis, and at the time the Board of Selectmen, as well as the Park and Rec Commission, were supportive of the concept of when possible, if there were excess funds available in that fund, and if the golf course was responsible for generating those excess funds, to reinvest those dollars into the golf course for capital projects and CNR needs. So we are actually proposing, and again, we'll talk more about this on workshop day, that given the health of the reserve that has been generated by the golf course, that we take and return those funds to the golf course to cover this so it does not have a taxpayer impact. For our public works projects, it's largely infrastructure projects. Many of them have been on your radar for some time, and to Sean's point, some of these items are grant funds that we are anticipating. So it's paving roads, it's our trails, sidewalks, bridge rehabs. One that I think is very important to know, and this has been planned for quite some time, is the Flower Bridge repairs are needed, and that will be a sizable project, and design is underway. For the Meadowood Barn restoration, again, this I think is a wonderful opportunity. This $650,000 is funded entirely by grants, donations, and lease payments that we're receiving from folks who are renting the ag lands as well as the barns. So a really nice opportunity for us to do some restoration work there, some interpretive signage at the site, and again, not have a taxpayer impact. Sewer projects. And then moving on to our CNR fund revenues and expenditures. And something I do just briefly want to speak to is that for the traditional payback method, that's the 416-250 that's been in place for decades, we really took a look at our items in the CNR that were true infrastructure needs that we had, replacements, things that were very important, urgent, etc., and to use the traditional payback method for those things that we really need to do, we have to do. For the special projects and initiatives that are more sort of goal-oriented to move us forward, for most of those projects, we were proposing to use the capital reserve for those projects. Again, just as a reminder, we do have a handful of CNR items that we do budget, and capital items that we do budget within the operating budget, and then transfer those dollars out to the CNR. So this is just a summary of those projects for you. In terms of use of reserves, we are proposing about $541,000 in use of capital reserves, again, largely for the projects that are more special projects and initiative oriented. That would still leave us estimated at 23, I believe, I'll have to double check, It's either 23-24 year end or 22-23. I will confirm that for you. So I'm just making a note. That we would still have about 1.5 million left in the reserve. And similarly for the capital reserve, you may recall the Board of Finance requested that the private duty fund, those dollars be transferred into the capital reserve. We still track them separately. So with the proposed uses projected, we would still have about 290 left in private duty capital reserve dollars. And then this concept of, again, using some of our parks and recreation reserve monies that were generated by the golf course for projects. So in addition to the golf course irrigation project, there are a few smaller golf course related CNR needs that we're proposing to utilize the reserve.
That irrigation project just won't die, huh?
It's in progress. It's in progress.
We've been
The
talking about it.
permitting,
We've been talking about forever.
the permitting did take quite a while. The permitting did take a long time.
Yeah, no, it's nobody's fault. It's just.
Yeah, we've been finding a lot of our projects that are requiring review by DOT, deep at the state level.
Damn government reviews. It's such a pain. You know. Holds everything up.
It's taking a while. It's taking a while. Yeah, DOT, just a quick little side note, they have experienced a massive wave of retirements. And last I heard, I think they were down like several hundred staff members. And so they're having a really hard time finding engineers, and it's just really slowing up review and a lot of our permitting. So what we've done for the presentation here is, again, we've highlighted in blue those items that we're proposing to use the traditional payback method. Other items are, again, through capital reserve, town aid road, grants, etc. At least for this point in time through the CNR, we were not proposing an additional cash contribution. Then we have our culture, parks, and recreation items.
Will the book label what's been added this year like you did in the past? Like what's
Yes.
new to this year that we didn't
yeah,
see?
it's
that?
highlighted in bold.
Yeah, okay.
And our general government items. And we did include charter revision. I did just want to flag that for you. Bob and I thought, $45,000 was probably a reasonable estimate for that project. And again, we are required both by charter as well as state law to at least consider looking at the charter once every 7 years.
Imagine that cost changes based on the scope in which we,
Exactly. And then we have our police items and our library items. Sewer. So moving on to fund balance. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the anticipated tax collection rate is around 99.5%. We're projecting fund balance at the end of the current fiscal year as well as the upcoming fiscal year to be right around 16.9%. Bond rating agencies do recommend communities in New England be in the 15 to 17% range. So that is a very healthy, very good range for us to be in. I do like to provide this reminder. Sean probably remembers this, Eric, and even Chris. There was a practice that the town would use the general fund reserve to provide mill rate relief, which is essentially taking reserve to pay for operating expenses. We are a AAA rated community, which again is something we should be really proud of. If we continue to do this definitely would have been very problematic from a bond rating perspective. So we just like to provide that reminder that we should not be using the general fund reserve for routine expenses or mill rate relief.
I believe it was budgeted, but this board did not approve the transfer in the final year.
That is correct. You have a very good memory. Yes, yeah. I will say again, the Board of Selectmen was very supportive and understanding of this. And again, I think this is just a nice chart to show the commitment, and that over the last 7 or so years, we gradually built up the fund balance contribution to that 15% level, and then we've been pretty consistently maintaining it with the Board of Finance's help at around 16% to 17%. So moving on to mill rates, which was Sean's burning question earlier in the evening. And I think that this historical chart tells a really good story. And the story is that prior to the housing market collapse in 2008, we had a normal of what we could generally expect following revaluation. And those are some of the peaks and valleys that you're seeing, right? Is that the mill rate kind of climbs and escalates, you have a reval, significant increases in market valuation, oh, your mill rate's going to decrease significantly. That was our normal for decades. And at one point you can see in the mid-1970s, our mill rate was actually over 60 mills at one point. When you think about, sometimes I'll hear anecdotally, like, how did we pay for all of our infrastructure when we were building the farms, building all the schools we had to build? Part of it was, right, we had a mill rate that was substantially higher at the time. But again, that was sort of that normal cycle that we were used to seeing. And then our world changed with the housing market collapse. And what we saw is that we weren't getting those significant increases in the grand list during a reval year. So we were not getting corresponding significant decreases in the mill rate. And so if you look at the chart kind of from about 2012 until this year, it's very stable actually for just about a decade or more, right? Where it was just a very, very stable mill rate, but not seeing those major fluctuations. And what you're about to see is that with the market increases and gains and having just undergone revaluation, is we're going to see what we really saw for decades previously, and we're going to see a significant decrease in the mill rate. And so we do have a mill rate calculator available on our budget page of the town website. So I do encourage folks to check that out. You can take the reval notice you got in the mail from us a few weeks ago. You can take a look at the proposed budget, plug in the mill rate, and you can get a sense of what are you paying now for taxes versus what you would be under the proposed budget. So,
Julie, can you just go back to that for a second? So there's so much debate all the time about how much more expensive Simsbury has gotten, right? I mean, the mill rate in 2009 was 29.6. Right, so I mean, it's on an equalized basis. Simsbury really hasn't gotten more expensive, right? It's all comparative to the values of the houses, and then this town's government over a long period of time before all of us has done a good job of setting the path where it hasn't been more expensive to live here. It tricks up, and then the market adjusts, and the tax rates the effective tax on a median house is relatively flat, right?
Yes.
Over a substantial period of time. I think we should all be proud of that. That's my point.
I think so too. And I think our mill rate has become more competitive, and we will typically update. We included the best information we have at this time, and we do financial benchmarking with towns in the valley, comparable towns in the greater Hartford region. And, folks will say like, oh, we have the most expensive mill rate in the valley. We don't anymore, and we haven't for some time. And again, I think that mill rate just has become much more competitive. Because sometimes folks will say like, oh, well, Farmington has such a low mill rate. Well, Farmington has a lot of pilot money. We will never be able to compete with the pilot money, right?
Also
So then it's
dying mall too, right? I mean, yeah.
Yes, right. So there are those trade-offs, and it's a really complex issue when you talk about a mill rate, because there is a lot based on a community's dynamics. They might have a better commercial residential mix than we have. They might have a lot of pilot money, et cetera. So it is a complex issue, but I think to Sean's point, we have done a really good job of becoming much more competitive in terms of our mill rate.
Well, I think there's also a conversation. You've got a conversation around equity and tax, and that's sometimes people choose to forget that part of the conversation about the equity that this reevaluation is now showing in their home, right? And it's I don't know what you want. You want a lower tax, or do you want lower equity? It's difficult, and then superior services blended in.
Right, exactly. And so based on the preliminary numbers, my understanding is the final numbers are just almost negligible in terms of the differences we're going to see, but that the median single-family home, 100% of assessed value is $391,500, 70% is $274,000. So under the proposed budget, with all of these factors with new growth, reval, et cetera, the increased state revenues, for the manager's proposed budget, this does not include the fire district, the mill rate would decrease from 37.41 to 31.05. And so our finance director, I think, prepared a really illustrative and wonderful slide for us that sort of indicates that, okay, if I have that median valued single family home versus the previous mill rate, the current mill rate, how does that work out for us in terms of a tax decrease for folks with the median valued home?
So neither rate includes fire, you're saying, correct?
Correct, right.
Okay.
That's a separate.
I just saw the star next to the one, that's I was just confirming.
And so, again, this is based on preliminary data, but just to give an appreciation for sort of ranges of homes, where they're valued, how many single-family homes we have within those bands, and the median value of the change based on reval. And what we are seeing for many of our homes is that they gained between about 25 and 30% in value during this most recent reval. I think what's really interesting, and I did just want to point out, is that the homes at the very end of that range, the high-end homes, you might recall last time when we did reval, there's this very, yes, you guys remember, there's a very
big reduction
phenomenon. It was a huge reduction, so much so that it was effectively about a 30% tax decrease for folks in that block. But this time, the homes really rebounded in value, and that's actually the band of homes that saw the greatest increases this year. So last time they saw the greatest decreases, this time they were seeing the greatest increases.
It's funny how that works out.
Yeah. Yep. And, where do the tax dollars go? This is not uncommon in Connecticut in that education, because of how we fund education in Connecticut, it's typically our most significant expense as a municipality. Under debt service does include town and Board of Education projects. Debt service does show up, though, in the town budget. You might recall that for various reasons, we own the infrastructure technically, and that is required to show up under the town budget, but it does include school projects as well. So in summary, highlights, again, I'm glad that we were able to fund our current services and programs while still lowering the mill rate. Again, that was largely due to the new growth and reval impact. I think that staff did a really remarkable job in advancing the initiatives and objectives that were important to you all. We continued our commitment to maintaining our infrastructure. We're maintaining our fund balance. We're maintaining capital reserve at a healthy level. And I think that we have presented a very responsible plan for you in terms of using the remaining ARPA dollars. So what I'm going to recommend in terms of our policy discussion that I think will help most advance your conversation on Budget Workshop Day in terms of the areas that really, again, need policy. Like I need the policy guidance from you, and Amy and I will help facilitate these remaining items for you. But we did receive outside agency operating grant requests this year. A number of our recipients were seeking increases. We did not build those increases into the budget. And then we did receive a new request from the Ambulance Association. They are looking for assistance to help fund the second vehicle that they have been putting on the road. What's also just an interesting fact about this in doing our research is that in the 1990s, paramedic level service was not actually being provided by the Ambulance Association. That, in fact, was being provided at the time by UConn. They were providing the paramedic level service, and we were helping to pay for that service in the 1990s. The last time on record that we could find that we made that payment was in 1997, and it was a little over $19,000, and in today's dollars, it was about $36,000 that we were at the time helping to subsidize that service. It was around that point in time that SVAA took over the paramedic license for our community, and then we stopped making a contribution at that time. So I definitely think that this is a very important request for us to have a discussion about. Again, we've talked, I think, about the outside agency ARPA funder requests. That's something else you'll need to make some decisions about. Another item that I think is very important for your consideration is adding money to the Board of Ed budget for our school buses. So I'd like for you to think about this as very similar to how we budget for our plow trucks, right? It's a very expensive piece of equipment that we have to do our work. And if we were to, out of the $416,250, pay $260,000 for a plow truck every year, that would not leave us with much revenue, right, left over to do all of the other things we need to do, replace mowers, small vehicles, playground equipment, etc. So we actually budget for that public works truck in the operating budget. What a lot of folks I don't think realized is that the traditional payback method that the Board of Ed gets, it's slightly more than us, but it's not much. It's just over $500,000. And the school buses we own, we purchase them it's been coming out of that 500,000.
Which is what it was designed for. That's why they created it.
But whether that was the intent for why it was created or not, it leaves such a small amount of money for all those other routine needs that we have in our schools, right? Like fixing, painting, replacing carpet, all of those things. And it leaves very, very, very little movement in terms of implementing the facilities master plan and all of the needs that we were identified. $300,000 is the equivalent of about 2 school buses a year. They really need to, it depends on the year, replace about 2 to 3 buses a year. So if it's a year where they're replacing 3 buses, right, their entire CNR budget is almost entirely gone. So I think that this is something where we don't have line item authority over the Board of Ed budget, but if there is an appetite for adding some things to the budget, I think that this is an area that would be worth consideration.
I gotta ask, why are we putting a Board of Ed capital item in our operating budget? Why isn't the Board of Ed?
It would not.
doing
It would go into the Board of Ed operating budget potentially.
So then why are we talking about it?
Because we will be having the capital and CNR discussion coming up on budget workshop day. So if you wanted to add this,
So we would cut it from the capital budget and they would add it to their operating budget?
it would be similar to the plow truck. So if you were supportive of this concept, it would be budgeted because, and I would have to check with Amy if it would be capital or CNR, but it would be very similar to the plow truck. So we would be.
Yeah, but that's in our operating budget, so why do
we
we
would be
need to?
operating it, budgeting it and operating with the transfer then going out to the CNR budget.
Right, but the Board of Ed decides that, we don't need to approve their CNR. We approve the rest of their capital. And again, the CNR fund was created specifically for their school buses. And I know that because I lived with the man that created it when he did it. So if they don't have sufficient CNR money, they need to talk to the Board of Finance about increasing that budget item. I mean, I agree that it's underfunded, but
Right.
the superintendent and the Board of Ed should be
They have had
asking for an
conversations about
increase
this
from
as
their
well.
CNR side.
Yeah, they have had conversations about this as well.
Yeah.
Again, we do have the ability to, again, not line item, but the ability to increase or decrease the overall budget.
But if they did it, we don't need to do anything, right?
If it was built in, right, you wouldn't have to necessarily take it out or add to.
So is what you're saying, they're unwilling to do it, so we're gonna do it for them?
I don't think that's a fair.
Or are you saying,
very
let me
confused
help you, or are you saying that this is, that you want to elevate the narrative around that fund from a strategic perspective, the way that we have approached other funds to develop a purchasing strategy versus at point of time, this is something that you're trying to make this fund healthier. So are you wanting us to help you with a conversation that they need to have and understand about strategically how to reformulate that fund,
Yeah,
essentially?
exactly. And I think, again, this is another advantage of having shared services and shared financial management services is we're better understanding these items and looking at the overall, right, the overall picture and the overall pot of money and thinking about these purchases for them in the same way that we're doing it on the town side of the house to help improve our overall financial health and also make sure that we're taking care of our buildings because at the end of the day, those school buildings we own them. They're our asset and they're our infrastructure.
I'm still confused on the math. So they changed their budget for the 300 or not?
It is not currently in there. It is something that they had a conversation around. But again, I felt it was worthy of note and to flag that for you for an awareness that they did have this conversation. And I think it is a concept that's worthy and worthy of discussion and support.
All right, we're gonna have to go through the math. And again, I mean, the simple answer is they put the 300 in their operating budget and the Board of Finance approves it and it's over.
I mean, it has to come through you all first.
But Sean, I think she's
Their
also
operating-
talking
hold on,
about.
though. Their operating budget does not come through us. They can put whatever they want in their operating budget. We have no authority over their operating budget.
Not line item.
And we don't approve their overall budget either. The Board of Finance approves their overall budget. So the Board of Ed can solve their bus problem by doing exactly what we did with the plows and putting 300 grand in as a line item in their $80 million budget. And it would be $80 million, 300,000. Conversation's over, right? That's the simplest way for them to solve this problem.
I would say, well, yes and no, because the budgets still have to come to.
We don't
all to
approve the Board of
approve and
Education
to
budget.
forward To referendum.
We forward them. We don't approve the Board of Education budget. We have no say over their number.
Okay.
We approve their capital. They don't have any say over capital. We send the number to the ballot, yes, but we cannot change it.
Okay. Well, more discussion.
If we can change it, that's news to me, and I'm gonna have some fun with the Board of Ed budget this year.
All right. Well, we can have more discussion.
Well,
but
we need to, I mean, if you're putting in the ether that we have authority over the Board of Education budget, that would be news to, I think, the six of us.
And capital.
I know we can approve capital, but if we can approve their operating budget, that is a very different conversation than I've operated under for 12 years.
Again, we don't have line item.
But if they put 80, I can say 79 from an overall budget standpoint. I can unilaterally chop their budget.
I will.
Yeah, let's
wait and see what happens.
That's a
And
big
I'm not
thing.
proposing a reduction. I am not proposing a reduction.
I know, but if you put us in
talking
the.
about this within the context.
I
of
understand
6%
that,
of
but
the
if you
overall
open the
capital
door of
strategy.
increasing, you can open the door for future decreasing too. We've got to be very careful how this conversation works.
So so just going back, you're talking about changing strategies or adding a strategy into a fund to create growth in that fund to take care of items like this, unintended costs at a point in time. So that's something so are we, that fund currently, is that something we can currently change the strategy on and then move over to the Board of Ed?
Yeah, again, I will.
For custodianship?
Yeah, I will try to get some clarity on this, but again, I think that if you all, when we're having the capital conversation on that Saturday workshop day, want to talk about the capital plan, the capital strategy for the Board of Ed, that this would be a good topic to talk about with them that day.
And I would also like clarity on the operating charges, right? Because if we change their capital, I am not understanding how that works together. And I want to be very careful before we open the door of any influence on the Board of Education's operating budget from this podium.
Right. I mean, $300,000 typically is a trigger for our capital plan, right? And the capital is part of the overall capital plan. It's part of what we talk about. Again, where we're proposing to show the budgeted expense as opposed to the capital plan is to show it in the operating because it is similar to, a highway truck. So.
Agreed, but where you put it changes who approves it. So we need to understand the logistics of
Okay, you
that.
mean I
Because
can look into that
accounting wise, I understand what you're saying. Approval wise, it gets very confusing. And again, at the simplest rate is if the Board of Ed needs $300,000 for buses, they should just put it in their operating budget. Because that's, I mean, again, I'm not understanding why we have to do an elaborate accounting method for, if that's what they need, they should budget for it. And again, with all due respect to our Board of Ed members, we bought their bleachers multiple times. We've righted their operating deficit this past year. And I don't want to use town capital to offset things that aren't happening in the Board of Education that should be. Because my understanding is there are challenges with those buses purchases to begin with. So the Board of Ed needs to stay diligent on the capital.
I will flag for them on that
Yeah.
Saturday. This is something.
Sure, we'll talk about it a lot on that day.
Right. But again, the $300,000 does trigger a capital threshold, which is why I thought it was important to at least flag this for your attention. Another possibility that we can discuss, and we did do this for the current year that we're sitting in, is to consider, do we want to use some additional cash to reduce bonding and the upcoming fiscal year to reduce the debt service impact in fiscal 25-26. And you might recall that we were anticipating in our debt modeling that when the second Latimer Lane debt issuance hits, that first time, 25-26, that we would be pushing about 8% of overall expenditures or being just over. So similar to what we did this year, right? We set aside some money to help smooth that debt service impact. We could do something similar this year if there's room within the budget. And then, of course, the service improvement conversation that we always have on budget workshop day.
And what was this year? Is it 600 and something?
It was just
the cash
around. It was just around 600. Yeah. Yep. Good memory.
600 for what?
That we set aside for cash.
Oh, yeah, the
Help with
cash to
debt service
capital.
smoothing. Right.
Yeah, the item on the cash to reduce bonding, that's something because of the chart where we go over 8% in that 25.
Right, and it's just
26
a
year,
bit,
tiny
but
bit.
again, it's an opportunity that we can consider.
And just so, that was something we talked about quite a bit. I started rewatching last year's with the ARPA funding for things that we might be bonding this coming year to avoid and pay cash for it this year and not bond for it. The example that I keep using that we also talked about last year was the Flower Bridge, the $1.9 million. Most of that is supposed to be bonded. If we did use ARPA funding for that, we wouldn't have that bond spike there, and we would be using the money for community asset that we've all kind of bought into. So that's just something that I'm sure I'll bring back up when we talk about capital. And the other thing that I wanted to comment on too, again, which I'll comment on Saturday and Thursday, is the ARPA outside agency funding request, which I was trying to go back last year, but we had set aside money for Farmington Valley Health District, the nonprofits, the business, the housing authority. I had looked at that as one and done, and that going forward, we would use the money more for capital investment items to reduce taxpayer impact and to reduce bonding. So that's just somewhere where I sit right now on things that I'm going to bring up during the
Wendy,
workshop.
You rode herd over the Jackie as well. Did SVAA bring the concept of the ambulance for ARPA?
To buy it?
Any sort of.
So
did they come to you at all?
They did, but it was they came to us, the fire district came to us, and the library came to us on the funding, the finance subcommittee, just to present their budget proposals to potentially use ARPA funding. But it wasn't, there was no commitment. We said fine. It was, the ask was, we want this money and maybe we could use ARPA, but we also pushed a little bit pushback that it's real, those are really budget asks regardless of if it's ARPA or not. So if we pay for those and how we pay for those, I think will be part of the bigger discussion, because we have other needs for that money too.
I was just thinking of the concept of health, ARPA health sort of dialogue.
I mean, the ambulance and others, they qualified for different federal programs, right, during the actual pandemic.
That's correct. Some of the organizations
Just
did,
curious.
such as the Ambulance Association, some of the paycheck and things of that nature programs that were there. The formal request, the ARPA funds that we received from the Ambulance Association was for the radio system loan forgiveness.
Okay.
So specific to that.
So technically, there's 220 in this year's budget, 150 for their operating and
That's what they were
70
looking
for the
for,
loan
correct.
waiver, right?
Correct. Yep.
Right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And then again, just future areas of focus. These are items that I think are important just to keep our eyes on as we continue to move forward in out years, but continue to monitor state budget and intergovernmental revenue. We've been very fortunate. I think the state has adopted a series of financial policies that have put them in a much more stable position. Therefore, our revenue, right, it has been much more stable. But again, continue to monitor that because, again, you'll probably recall some of the times, particularly after the housing market collapse, where the state took away a lot of money mid-year after budgets were adopted. So again, just continue to watch that closely. Again, talking about our CNR needs versus sort of the traditional annual contribution, right? I think that those numbers haven't been adjusted in quite some time, and we're finding that sort of the needs are really outpacing it. And I think we've found some really creative ways to help with that. But that's just, I think, again, sort of one of those long-term strategies for us to keep our eyes on. And then again, I think that this was really important. I don't want to lose sight of this because, again, it was important, I know, to this board and the Park and Rec Commission, is to think about ways and how we can continue to try to build the town's contribution for community use and how we can contribute to the Parks and Rec Fund because we have an inequity now for our program participants.
Maria, back to the 416 and kind of the same rabbit hole I went down on the Board of Ed side. Obviously, with our town master plan, the farms master, all the master plans we've done, right? That 416 hasn't been, as you just pointed out, adjusted since then. So is there potentially a recommendation for 416 should become X?
Right.
Or is that essentially what we've done with the cash to capital? And
Right, we've done that a little bit with things like the patrol vehicles, the admin vehicles. So we've provided on the town side of the budget some relief there that we haven't yet done on the Board of Ed side of the House. Otherwise, right, that 416 is really tiny. And when you think about looking at our comprehensive needs, right, IT is a good example. That is something we were not budgeting for, we were not planning for, we were falling behind in our technology needs. That's now coming out of the 416 250, right? So that's, I think, a good example of something that we weren't budgeting for. But the reality is we have an expense. And so without those adjustments, and I think parks infrastructure is a good example as well. And I think just a good anecdote, I probably shared this in the past, was our park superintendent who's been here for a long time said that we've probably done more in the last 5 years to make renovations to our parks infrastructure than we had in his previous 30. Again, we were just falling behind, right? And we know that. We know that we're replacing things that are 40 plus years old in terms of our parks infrastructure. And so, right, I think there's going to be a bit of a reckoning. Again, I think we've been creative, but it's something for us, I think, just to be mindful of and kind of keep our eyes on.
so maybe, I know you guys are swamped, especially with Melissa being out, but, on the on the operating transfer side of the general fund, we've got 446, right, which is the 416 plus 30, right? So all in for all the ways are we gonna see, or can we see like a schedule just for what that ongoing maintenance again is? And I know we've talked about it in the past.
Yeah, we did run that analysis, I think 2 budget cycles ago.
And it doesn't need to be, again, just a quick schedule. It doesn't need to be the whole analysis, but whatever it was 2 million or,
Yep.
Whatever that number was, what has it turned into on our side? And
Right.
then is there an opportunity for, and again, I know the Board of Ed is down the road as well, but what's the Board of Ed number, right? Because we've funded all these studies and we drive the Board of Finance nuts when we come back one at a time. And again, to maybe again have that be a focal point for the discussion. The 416 is really 2.1. It's just in 12 places. Right. And again, I'm sure they realize that when they dig into it, but that being part of the discussion. And then, the Board of Ed, they need 2.8, right? And they have 600 of the CNR, and they're not actually getting the rest of that 600. So their infrastructure is going like this. We've maintained ours. And then as we get back into that $300,000 conversation, I think that would help at least me and perhaps our colleagues frame what are we talking about here? So it's $4 million for baseline capital on both sides of the house.
Right.
I'm making up the numbers, but
Yeah, but no, I think last time when we ran it, and again, it might have been 2 cycles ago, I think we were showing sort of our baseline CNR needs on the town side,
Right.
not even inclusive of the Board of Ed side,
Right.
was in the neighborhood of, I think it was like 2.2 million
Right.
was our estimates.
Yeah. that was just to maintain the services,
Just to
do the
maintain
studies,
existing
et cetera.
infrastructure,
That
exactly,
didn't include,
just
that
to
didn't
maintain.
include debt service, et cetera.
Right.
Again, I know that was a huge exercise, not looking for that before Saturday, but just a 2.2 turned into 2.4.
Yeah, we could definitely try to run that again.
Okay,
Yeah, definitely.
hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Sure.
So as a reminder, we have our budget workshops coming up
Waiting for
on
these.
Thursday evening and Saturday, March 11th. And one possible, as you're starting to look through your materials, if you do have specific questions that come to mind prior to the workshops, one possible, we really do appreciate getting those questions in advance. I think it helps to expedite our responses, helps us be a bit more responsive. And then to Sean's point, we are down a very important staff member this budget season. Yeah, so again, it's not required, but it is helpful when you have items in advance that you're thinking about, if you could pass those along to Amy and I.
Is there a way that we can, I think we tried this a little last year, a lot of us may ask the same questions, in a separate email or on the road or whatever, to help kind of coordinate those. I know you guys tried to do that a lot last year, coordinate those and then, push it out to all of us so you don't have to answer multiple times.
Typically, we'll provide responses to the entire board.
Yeah.
Last year, just due to the volume of requests that we had, we I think had a couple of instances where it did
Got out of sync,
require
yeah.
20 or so responses a few days in a row. So again, we do find it's easier just to make sure that we're taking everything that we're receiving from you all. If it's not a lot, it might be 1 or 2 emails. But last year in particular, just due to the volume, we prepared those comprehensive response documents for you.
Is there, just a question, is there a Dropbox or anything like that where I know we're not supposed to communicate back and forth, but is there somewhere we could put our questions, we could see what people have asked, so we don't ask it again? I mean, that's just stuff I've done at work. I don't know if that's possible.
I think that might be a little tough if you were
Okay.
sharing a document.
Like
for
an
voice
Excel,
purposes,
just with the tracking.
Which is typically why we'll say, send your questions
Okay.
to staff, and then, right, we're not gonna answer the same question twice. We're gonna make sure that we get that information equally out to all.
Let's be clear,
Okay.
not send your questions to staff. You don't want,
I'm sorry, to Amy and I.
To you, yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you to Amy
Yeah,
and
we
I.
shouldn't be going to department heads, right? We should be coming to you guys.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
To that end, can we, there's a way to get the PowerPoints, because I know everybody loves PowerPoint. If we can get the PowerPoints ahead of time, because often there's a ton more questions because of the things we choose to highlight in the PowerPoints versus what's in the budget book.
Definitely.
And I would love if the PowerPoints, instead of the pretty pictures and all the rosy stuff, would articulate the changes and like things that I'm gonna go find in the next week. That would be, and you know what I'm talking about. I love the opportunity to showcase things, but it would really move things along if we knew ahead of time where department heads were gonna push or ask for different things.
Yeah, we will definitely do our best to get.
I know it's hard, but
No, yeah, but we will definitely do our best to get the slides out in advance. I think last year we were able, for both dates, to get the majority of slides out
Yeah.
in advance to folks.
And that did help, because
Yes, and then we will also make sure too that, we always post these materials online as well, just to make those available to the public.
And if we could obviously get a copy of yours.
Oh, yes, so this will be posted online tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, because this was great.
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
a lot of
let's
meetings.
fill up our calendar for the next month.
3 questions.
I don't see Max's surgery up there. Oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. That was
3 questions.
Expected health information.
It's purely educational. How many team members, how many associates does this town have in total?
Oh, sure. We actually have a chart. In the supplemental tab, we have our.
It's not listed though. It doesn't say there's not a
It's
tab.
the very last supplemental tab. Our full-time equivalent status for what we call our regular folks is about 180 FTEs.
And then add the BO.
And then if you add the BOE on top of that, and then with our seasonal folks, so that could be, camp staff.
How many benefited people do we have?
Most of our regular part and full-time people, again, that number is around 180. But we can go up to as much in our busy season, sometimes close to 500 active employees. So we have a pretty large, again, seasonal and temporary workforce that requires a lot of work with like in-processing and training, and that's just sort of, part of the nature of the
And then you add
service.
the BOE and it's how much?
That's a great question. I don't have that number handy, but I can get that for you.
It's a lot.
It's quite a bit more.
Matt usually has that in his
He does have that in his budget.
Then other question. When I always forget, is it a police study or is it a public safety?
Police
What's the
study.
correct?
The staffing
Police.
study?
Yeah.
Staffing study.
And that comes online hopefully
Day after we approve the budget.
after we approve the budget.
Yeah, so the firm that we hired has been working
Yep.
really diligently on that. They've presented a draft of the study to the chief. I have a draft of that. I've been really focused on budget, and we'll be digging.
Just
into
ask him,
that.
like when,
I do expect
I
that
could
we
hold you
will.
to it.
Yeah, that we will probably be releasing that to you sometime in the March or April.
Okay, so
timeframe.
it's this. Okay, yeah.
Right.
And then last question, no money for charter reform.
Yeah, it was in there.
There was? All right, that was my AD I flashed out.
Okay.
Okay?
45,000.
That's when I drifted for a second. Okay, I drifted for a second. All right. All right.
Even asked a
There
question.
was even a
about it,
question
Chris.
on it. Yeah. There was even a question.
I did not ask a specific question.
I-
You did. I told you, ADD flashed here for a while.
You just missed that one.
Glycemic levels dropping and my ADD is getting me, okay?
It's after 8.
Does anybody know? See if it's not that I care, but I'm just curious.
We still have a meeting.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you, Maria. No, I know. I was
Maria.
going to see if it was happening now. Just
No, it hasn't started.
oh, good. Okay. All right. So, well, we can move on. My first selectman's report. I'm happy to admit there is no first selectman's report tonight. So I'm moving. Thank you. I'm moving over to give it to Maria for the town manager's report.
Did you really ask?
I did.
I'm not making that up, Chris.
What makes it larger or smaller?
Did you ask after I asked?
Yeah. It was after that.
Okay.
You could do your town manager's. We could
Thanks, I just need a sip of
expedite. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was thinking.
After an hour of talking.
Right.
So just one quick announcement. We are, again, expecting the inclement weather to roll in this evening and carry on particularly through tomorrow morning. So we will be opening municipal facilities at about 12 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So just to give, again, folks an opportunity to get the snow cleared, travel to work safely, but we do anticipate a noon opening tomorrow.
Schools are already closed.
They are.
Yeah, they already closed schools.
Yeah. 6:03.
Oh, they
Yep.
did?
I didn't
yeah,
check to see
6:03.
who won the race on Simsbury Neighbors for posting it.
I'm out of that loop.
The text came at 6:03.
Oh, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Anybody wanna brave having a liaison and subcommittee report tonight?
I would just like to say that tomorrow, in the afternoon, 3:30 to 4:30 at Eno Hall is office hours with Maria and Kristen Formanak, our Director of Social Services, and me. So barring any further inclement weather, we will be there at 3:30 if anyone would like to come and visit us.
Great. I'm sorry, I forgot that. I didn't have it in
I
front
do
of
have
me.
a
today.
highlight from the Parks and Rec.
Oh.
Meeting. Yeah. So you guys
on.
all saw much of the signage is
Yep.
quickly moving and changing over. Another highlight is that they are close to finalizing the design and replacement for the Simsbury Farms playscape, which is a big deal. You know, to many. So that's a big thing. And there's also a big project going on up at the baseball fields. Simsbury Little League is funding a major renovation, Field 6 up top, which is sort of where the memorial pool is. That'll elevate their ability to hold outside events and stuff. So it's kind of a neat activity there. Oh, and I think most of the camp's upcoming programming that has been opened up for the coming summer season is already all full. Wow. Unfortunately.
Did they? I want to ask you a question. The batting cage facility that Babe Ruth is building, is anything?
There's
Okay.
Yeah, that's a triangular
It's
conversation.
in progress?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. Hold up due to town bureaucracy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No.
Permitting. No, I'm just
Permitting.
DOT.
Okay.
just kidding.
It's the conversation moving. I think they'll be. They'll.
Yeah.
They're going to be doing it in conjunction, and it's going to be kind of a
Okay,
neat
cool.
complex.
Okay, anybody?
I have EDC.
Sure.
Through EDC, I'd just like to make sure that I welcome new businesses. So I would like to welcome Lion's Den Coffee Shop that opened up at 712 Hop Meadow Street. Additionally, the Inland Wetlands public hearing regarding the proposed 830G housing application at 446 Hop Meadow Street is on March 7th at 7:30 at the library.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Selectmen action. Our first item is tax refunds and ask for a motion effective February 27th to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $2,326.42 and to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute the tax refunds.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We have a donation from Keith and Carol McLean Sheneman for the food social services. Do you have anything you want to add on here? I think they do this regularly, don't they?
It was a very kind contribution for our food programs.
Yeah, they're very generous. And I'd like to ask for the motion effective February 27, 2023 to accept a donation from Keith and Carol McLean Sheneman in the amount of $1,850 for the purpose of supporting Simsbury's food programs.
So moved with our thanks.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Just losing it here. Okay, and now we have the proposed revisions to the personnel rules and regulations. I was just going to say this came to personnel a while ago, but it's gone through some changes since then, so kind of read it for the first time. But if you want to add any background information here?
Sure. So this is a project that I'm particularly proud of and excited. I'd really like to thank Tom Fitzgerald and Eric Gomes in my office. They spent a considerable amount of time with myself and Attorney Harrington, who's our labor counsel, working to update this document. It had not had any sort of a comprehensive update at least as far back as 2009, possibly even further back than that. And so the personal rules and regulations, they apply to all of our non-union staff. They also apply to our unionized employees for matters that their collective bargaining agreement does not cover. This is a really important tool. And again, it was so dated, it just truly needed a comprehensive update. So I really appreciate their time and energy on that. We also had our leadership team members review the document as well. They provided some feedback. And then since the personnel committee had reviewed it, there was one change upon further discussion that we felt was important to add, which was regarding political activity. And certainly, our staff members on their own time, that they absolutely are entitled to that right. But that essentially none of our staff members, while on duty for the town, could be compelled to use town resources for political purposes, that they are not going to be required to make contributions to political campaigns, etc. So we felt that was, again, something that was consistent with our new form of government, and that was a piece that we did add under section 1.5.
I did want to add, you did mention that you took out the grievance piece, and I know that was something we had talked about when we were talking about doing these personnel rules and regulations. I'm going to talk about the exit interview piece, but we also talked about, was there a grievance process for non-union employees? And if that should be spelled out, if you could explain or speak to why we don't want to have that in here.
Sure, so that's rather atypical. It is something Labor Council advised against. I would concur with that recommendation. Typically, a grievance is a violation of a collective bargaining agreement, and under MIRA in Connecticut, that typically falls under the SBMA. Other matters fall under SBLR, but a grievance would typically be, again, a grievance of a contract item,
Right.
not just anything and everything, but specific to the CBA. Our non-union employees are not subject to a CBA. The process is not, it does not, really, it does not fit. It's a process meant for our employees who are covered under collective bargaining agreements. And so again, at the advice of counsel, we had removed that section.
Okay.
Yeah. And the CHRO is for all other right? I mean, it's for when you're sexually harassed or discriminated against, or there are mechanisms in law, and union employees and non-union.
That's correct. They
would
both
follow
have those
that path.
remedies.
So was there, purely informational, so Sean, you've been doing this long enough, that guidance of that, was there a change that at some point that brought that to the board, or have we basically not have an evolved policy for a while?
There's no grievance process for when you disagree with your boss and
So-
outside of a union world. That's just not how it works.
So we're in a better position now from a liability, I hate to say that since that it casts that someone's in a negative position, but before we were more exposed without having this, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, again, for our non-union staff members, again, it's so atypical. Even though we did have that in the dated personnel rules, at least during my time here, we had never received a grievance from a non-union staff member. Again, the process is really geared more towards the collective bargaining agreements, and the grievance process in the collective bargaining agreements varies by bargaining agreement. And that's really where it's more appropriate, is to have it in those collective bargaining agreements where we currently have
I
it.
said it a different way. There's nothing to grieve.
Yeah.
Right, because there's no contract,
Right.
correct?
There's nothing to grieve.
Well, I applaud the individuals who brought this forth and caught it and essentially evolved it.
Yeah, Attorney Harrington did a good job on that for us.
I have a question. It had said that when you're hiring a new employee, if you decide to have a panel to interview, that's chosen by the town manager. And I was just wondering if it was considered, rather than an autocratic kind of process to that, of making it more democratic through perhaps the personnel subcommittee determining that panel. And is it the same for all employees, or would be a department head be different in how that panel is selected?
Sure. So again, typically the recruitment process falls under my purview, under the charter. And my style has generally been, particularly for frontline staff, I empower my HR staff to sort of make those decisions. Given the level of the position, the technical expertise required, we may use internal panelists, we may use external panelists, we may use some combination thereof. Something I brought with me here, that, for members of our leadership team, I have typically tried to involve a pretty wide range of stakeholders. While that selection ultimately does fall to me for the panelists as well as the candidate, I do find getting stakeholder input is helpful.
And department head positions also, I think most, if not all of them, come to us. And I think that you've put a process together that ultimately leads to a positive outcome at the end.
I would agree.
Well, I was going to ask the process, the only one that I've been involved in was the planning director, and you did ask at that point, and I don't know if that was part of the process, but we ended up selecting someone on the board to sit in on that, and that seemed like that was a historical process. Did under your, like, somebody as at a department head level, did someone always from the board sit in on those hiring
We hired
panels?
most of the department heads we have now. I and another board member participated in all of them.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that is part of the process
That
then.
is something that I asked
Okay.
and invited.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought the town planner process, being a part of that, I thought there was a nice variety of
Thank you.
people on the panel with different experiences and thought, a different sort of opinion or thought process, or
perspectives.
coming from a different perspective. So I thought
Yeah,
that was good.
We've hired a finance director I've been part of 3 recruitments, 2, 3. one under the old form, one under the new form, same process,
Right.
basically.
Right, and where I found and thought that it would be helpful to have Board of Selectmen involvement is because, again, this is not typical in manager form of government, but our charter does have you involved with the appointment of a preferred candidate that I identify for a number of our department head level positions. And I certainly wouldn't want to get to the point of having selected a candidate only in open session for you all to say, no, we don't really feel so comfortable with this person. Again, it's that in and of itself is a little challenging, and as we move into charter revision is something I will be reviewing with you in terms of the concern about having elected officials involved in the hiring process. We can sometimes run afoul of undue influence, but that's a conversation for charter revision. But again, just given that you all do have a role in the appointment process for some of those individuals, I thought it was prudent to involve folks. And I think over the years, I know Chris and Mike Payne helped with hiring Tom Tyberski as a for example. Sean had helped with finance director recruitment. Eric has helped me with town clerk recruitment. So as we've had changes in department heads, I think that pretty much every recruitment we've had at least one or two board members participate in the process.
Do you have I have a question.
I do too.
Okay.
That doesn't matter. It's up to you, Chair, Madam Chair. I'd like to go first.
Well, I'll ask. I have two things, but I'll do one. So the only thing that stood out to me was the exit interview 10.5, because we talked a great deal about this in the last year. And it was one of the reasons, again, that we brought up revisions to the personnel rules and regulations. And we came to the conclusion that we implemented a process where everyone would be offered the chance to give an exit interview or not give one, but to at least show on a form that they were asked whether they wanted to do that or not. I did not see that referenced here, so I'm not sure why not. Like, that was something we really spelled out, I thought, in personnel and in other discussions, and that this exit interview, because basically it just says they're invited to provide feedback, but we actually made it, you need to say you were offered one, whether you want to give one or not, you were offered one. So we did change that process.
That is correct. We did change that process. It has regrettably had a bit of a chilling effect in our world, in which as public employees, most of what we do is foiable. And regrettably, I think since spring of 22, we have not had an individual even provide us with verbal feedback anymore, which is unfortunate. But no, we are following that process. And the only instance in which we generally do not offer it, which again, this is upon Attorney Harrington's advice, which I think is very reasonable and sensible, is when we're doing a termination for cause.
Right, that I understood. So yeah, we're not forcing anybody to give a exit interview, but we're making sure that they're offered one, is all that this form is doing.
And that is occurring.
And so we don't need to have that stated here.
And I think it says that we are offering in the personnel rules.
Okay, invited. Okay.
Inviting folks to participate.
Wendy's going to go so far as to say that are we memorializing it in a document that says the person must
be offered one.
Offered and shown a place to sign, check, and sign. We're just trusting the process, essentially, which we do. Okay, so is that what you want, Wendy?
Well, I would like it to say that, just because I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about that. And again, I'm not forcing anybody to give an exit interview. I'm just saying you were offered one, because that was a complaint that we had heard, whether it was valid or not. And that was
I'm also just sharing what's been unfortunate is that prior to that new process being implemented is that on a pretty regular basis, employees would provide good constructive feedback to my staff, my HR staff, and now that's no longer happening.
Even though they can just say, this is just, so if somebody says you can give an exit interview orally or written, and whether I want to do it orally, it won't be documented. And if I want to do it orally, I can just say, yes, I gave one without writing it down. I mean, that's what I don't get.
So we can capture in the HR log that we received, we conducted an exit interview. So you want to know that it's happening. So
I don't know. I want to know that it was offered. I don't care if it happened or not.
Wendy, excuse me. I think what Maria's, I don't know. I think what Maria's saying is that even if we memorialized and said that we are creating this document and we're going to put it in front of people, people aren't even going to sign the document to say, I don't even want to tell you anything about what
Shut down
happened.
is what
Yeah.
we're getting. We're hearing
That's what
here.
she's saying.
Yes,
So-
thank you. Is that the new form and the new process we implemented has.
So even if we do it, the person's still not going to,
Just say they were offered one?
they're not even going to do that. They're not going to they're not even acknowledge an acknowledgement,
Okay.
it sounds like.
That's what we're hearing. Is that's what's happened? Is
Or
people
people
are
are
not.
just signing off and they're saying like, I don't want to do anything at all now.
So we've lost the feedback. Is
Correct.
the point here?
That's correct.
So we've got a signature, but we've lost the feedback.
That's correct.
So it defeats the process of the purpose of an exit interview.
That is correct.
Okay, kind of don't follow that, to be honest with you, because if somebody's, I'm not going to belabor it, I'm going to trust the town attorney and Maria, but let me just finish. If I'm leaving here and somebody says, do you want to give an exit interview orally? And I'm like, yes, I do. I have a sheet of paper that says, were you offered an exit interview? And I say I was. Nobody has to hear what I said, right? Because that check mark doesn't mean that they heard what I said. If I want to do one written, I can say, okay, I'll write it down and check off, yes, I was offered one. And if I don't want to give one orally or written, I can just check off and say, no, I don't want one,
That's
right?
what people are doing now. That's correct.
That's what people
Okay.
are doing.
That's what
But
people are doing.
what you're not understanding is people
Yeah,
are
I'm
no
not
longer
under-
giving us feedback.
That's correct.
They're no
Why?
longer-
Because they have to check
Correct,
this
because
off?
we are introducing, we're hearing from the town manager that the entrance of a form has chilled any feedback.
So the check
we're
mark
getting a
is
check
chilling
mark.
feed mark.
I'm just, again,
Feedback.
I haven't taken one. I don't know how I would react,
Okay.
but
I believe
we
that's
got
a-
feedback previously. We are no longer getting feedback since the new process. We could keep going, but I would think we'd rather have the feedback than the check mark.
Okay,
Do we have,
give it a rest then, but I still don't get it.
was the feedback prior, did it tend to be oral or was it written?
Yeah, it was
usually
oral.
And again, I think in part it's because in our world so much, right, it's voyable and sometimes two people will share feedback can even be really personal, right, personal stories and personal reasons why people are leaving. And while they'll be very forthcoming with myself or my HR staff about oh, I'm leaving for X, Y, and Z personal reason, like it's not professional. They're not gonna reduce that to writing, or they're certainly not going to want us to take notes about those reasons, because again, those would, unless it's disclosing a medical condition, would be disclosable. So again, in our world, generally the feedback that we would get would be verbal from folks.
So could we just, Maria, would you be amenable to inserting the word, because I think this is what everybody's trying to get at.
And
is
I'm
we
sorry, what
shouldn't-
page, Sean, are you looking at?
10-5, or 10.5.
41 in the document.
Is employees who are leaving the organization in good standing
Are
must be
offered.
invited to provide feedback.
Are offered, yes.
Must be provided. Just put the word must in. Therefore, you, Eric, and the department, somebody must. That's a requirement here.
Thank you.
That's I
That's-
think
yeah,
the
that's
spirit
good
of
enough.
what
What's
everybody's looking
happening,
for.
right.
And then remove the check mark because it's suppressing the feedback,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah,
But
it's
the point
something about it
we
that's very
don't want,
off-putting.
if you and everyone else are not here, we don't want people picking and choosing who the employees they want feedback from and who they don't. We want a clear, everybody in good standing that departs, we would like to get them the opportunity to give us feedback, which is good for the
Right,
organization.
exactly, which is
Right.
the intent, right.
So if we insert the word must, I think that would capture the intent. And then if for
Oh,
whatever
I
reason.
see, yeah.
Thank you. I think that's, I
That's
just
what
made,
you're doing,
I just
right?
made that note, just are offered, like make sure they're offered.
Must be offered. Anyone in good standing
That's it.
must be. If you're getting terms, you don't get one because we know what your feedback is. You
That
hate us.
sums it up.
Right, but if you are departing the organization, we must attempt to gather your feedback.
Correct, yeah.
So we're not picking and choosing. I like Bill, I don't like Sally, I'm only gonna ask Bill.
Yep, so instead of are invited, we'll sub that out for must be.
I mean, is that fair? I mean, that's.
Yeah, that's I think exactly what we're
That's the
trying to
spirit of what
accomplish.
we're, nobody's looking to suppress feedback.
Exactly, exactly.
And the only,
worked out.
thank you.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to mention is I sent this out and I think I shared it with everybody that the CFEPA now includes board and commission members in any harassment policies. We are considered employees under harassment parties. So I raised that issue. I brought that up to Maria and Mike, and I asked if we needed to incorporate anything in the personnel rules to
state that, and I didn't hear back, so I'm assuming Mike was good with not
Yes.
incorporating that.
Correct, right. He did not feel that this was an appropriate document for that. It is something that our city managers group became aware of in the fall, and Trish and Melissa were working on a plan in terms of both notifying, training, and tracking our boards and committee members because they will be required to
Yeah.
participate in prevention of sexual harassment training.
Yeah.
But this was a surprise to pretty much, I think, I think most folks, including the Town Attorneys Association. It was embedded within some legislation, and again, it just wasn't on folks' radar. So we will be working to implement that.
So that's really interesting. So they're including us in the definition of employees, but we're actually being trained on not being the perpetrator. Because we can always cause the harassment. We are considered a third party from harassment standpoint. Yes, employees are not, they should not be harassed by any elected official. They already have protection from that. So the state is now requiring that the potential harassers of board members,
Have to engage in the prevention.
we have to engage
training.
in the training, right?
And we fall under any rules, personnel rules.
Which the town was liable for already.
Okay.
If one of Maria's staff was harassed by a board member, Maria's obligated to take action and to protect that employee.
Right, and that will fall under our anti-harassment policy
Right.
because you're not a staff member versus this is for our paid employees.
Okay, so we can look forward to more sexual harassment training that we've
That's
had
gonna
in
be
the corporate
interesting.
world, in
Yeah, 'cause
other
companies
jobs,
get in
we can
trouble
have
when
that
people
here.
don't complete that. That's really gonna be interesting to implement.
Okay, I
It's
just,
a lot of work.
I just wanted that out, people
That's
to
a
know
good- that's
that,
a
to
good point.
make sure that
That's a lot of
boards
work.
and commissions knew that. Okay.
That's good.
Heather has.
I do. I have another question as well. You know, when it talks about harassment and, you know, certain circumstances going to human resources. And I just want to bring up again where the human resources desk is just in a hallway outside of an office, and it doesn't really allow for that process to take place. Because there's really not a space to have any sort of privacy or confidentiality. And is that best practices, or should that be considered to move the HR director to an actual office with a door?
Yeah, so I guess I'll also just say as a reminder, under the charter, I'm actually the HR director. And so, you know, all of the sort of decision-making responsibility does ultimately fall to me. But I do have a very, very capable, talented HR professional who serves as our HR manager.
Yes.
So that individual is typically the point of contact for day-to-day, whether it's investigatory matters, you know, complaints of harassment, you know, whether it's processing family medical leaves, whether it's the initial point of contact for engaging in the ADA and corrective process, et cetera. So I do have, again, a very talented HR professional who's working for us, who does the bulk of that work. But ultimately, any decision-making responsibility around those matters would fall to my position. And it was also that way under the old form of government as
Maria,
well.
to the concern that it's near your office, I imagine that the employee could request to meet in a conference room or their office or even off-site potentially.
Right. And in fact, we don't really have a lot of space in the building, and you know, our office is a little bit tucked out of the way to provide a little bit of privacy. But
I mean, the real estate challenge exists everywhere from a desk standpoint. I mean, the head of my HR sits outside, our division CEO sits outside my boss's boss. I mean, it's just where people sit.
I will point out too that last year, or was it the year before, whenever we did the sexual harassment policy, personnel, I think with you guys, we did include the, if there was sexual harassment against our town manager, that it could come to
Yeah.
the personnel subcommittee after going through the deputy and, yeah. HR, but not the HR person that's, if they're the accused. But it did give, we wanted to create another body in here to bypass, you know, if need be. So.
I mean, the good news is in our business, Channel 3 will find out before any of us will, so it'll be out there.
Okay, so if we have I think we have a small change here.
I've made note of that change. Yep.
Okay. Should we, do
We
we
can
want to
approve it
table
with
it or
that
approve
change.
it with that change?
Yeah, we can approve the caveat.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move effective February 27th, 2023 to approve the proposed revisions and amended changes discussed tonight to the personnel rules and regulations.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Nice job.
Any
Nice job with
opposed?
these.
Okay.
It was a ton of work, thank you. Very much needed.
And no budget, right? Because we originally thought we were going to have to pay for this.
We did.
Very,
Okay.
very tiny. To do, and again, I really want to thank Attorney Harrington. To do this work along with updating 5 organization-wide policies, 4 of which we have already done with this group, they charge us a flat project fee of $4,000, which is incredibly reasonable for this
That's
work.
phenomenal.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Considering we're gonna pay 58 grand for a tourism map, that's pretty darn good.
Well, we aren't yet. It's a proposal. Okay, so the move effective February 27th, 2023 to accept the resignation of Ferg Jansen from the Greater Hartford Transit Board of Directors. I guess he's been on here for 20.
Forever.
Yeah.
Long time.
So thanks, Ferg.
I'll move that with our thanks.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Appointments to various boards. We could move effective February 27th, 2023 to appoint Colleen Yates as a regular member of the Library Board of Trustees with a term ending December 4th, 2023. Move effective February 27th, 2023 to appoint Mike Payne as a regular member of the Board of Ethics with the term ending January 1st, 2027.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the last item are these appointments to the Community for Care. So Personnel Subcommittee, Amber, Rachel, and Kristen met. We had a few people that we interviewed, and right now we're moving forward 3 people to get them going so they can have a quorum. And we're hoping to meet with more people because we did also interview another person. So we will be looking at that in conjunction of each other. So move effective February 27th to appoint Kathleen Mayhew, Laura Doyle, and Noel Bodenberg as members of the Community for Care Committee with terms expiring December 4th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we do not, just a heads up, are the minutes, anybody have a problem with the minutes? There's a letter in here that the Performing Arts Center was sending to apply for a grant. They just wanted to show the support the town is given. That's in there, and there is no executive session, surprise. So I look for a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
So moved.
All
I'll second that.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.